Hey there, Juice and Jammers, it's me again, Sonic the Hedgehog. You might be wondering why I'm laying here looking up at you like this. Well, it's because I've got a problem with my way past coolest bod. My eyes don't shut. That's right, these babies got no eyelids to speak of. So sleep? Let's just say I've had to go hasta la vista mista to my circadian rhythm. Now this guy gets his shut-eye using Manta Sleep masks. They've got a variety of masks to choose from, including hot, cold, and weighted options. If you're unsure which is best for you, there's a little quiz on their website that you can take. Personally, I choose the sound mask with its discreet, slim speakers that I can't feel at all. This way I can fall asleep to my favorite comforting atmospheric sounds. You know, thunder, rain, and lightning. Okay, I can't keep up this stupid bit anymore. Seriously though, while I've never been able to get comfortable sleeping with earbuds, with these it's no problem at all to listen to music, and I love being able to have an audiobook or some relaxing tunes on as I drift to sleep. It's super comfortable, and the same goes for the main eye cups. They totally block out any lights. They're great for naps, and it means that it just doesn't really matter how much natural light is in the room or anything like that. So if you want a high-quality sleep mask to help you get your rest, be sure to check out Manta Sleep's website using the link in the description. And don't forget to use my code Lowart to get 10% off your order of a Manta Sleep mask. Thanks to Manta for sponsoring today's video, and thank you for watching.
Sonic the Hedgehog believed he purchased a one-way ticket to Hedgehog Heaven when he chose to save Planet Mobius from annihilation by sacrificing his life. Though he successfully saved Mobius, instead of buying the farm, Sonic was miraculously propelled hundreds of thousands of light years across the universe to a distant galaxy. For the past several weeks, he's traveled the cosmic spaceways in an attempt to return to the loved ones he left behind, friends and family who believe him dead. Along the way, he's confronted his dark side, been worshipped as a deity, defeated an entity capable of destroying whole planets, and learned of Mobius' secret history. Now, for the fastest hero alive, the journey has ended. Or has it?
Before jumping into the specifics of Sonic's return home, there's one story in the post-space era that demands our immediate attention. During the battle with the Zora, Aurora warned Knuckles that returning to life to save his friends would come with a cost. And it has. His super strength, durability, gliding, and chaos-imbued powers have vanished. That, combined with Knuckles and the chaotic Stain to help the Acorn Kingdom in Sonic's absence, has allowed Eggman to finally take over Angel Island. However, with Sonic's return and a distress call claiming that Locke has been captured, our heroes know it's finally time. Time to read what I believe to be Karl Bollers' Archie Sonic magnum opus. It's the return to Angel Island. Oh, you thought we were done with Knuckles before? No. It's still crunch time. The four-parter Return to Angel Island truly exemplifies the very best of Archie Sonic up to this point. Heart and humor, commitment to continuity, satisfying climaxes, charming character writing, and absolutely phenomenal art. Let's start with that last point actually, the art. Man, if you thought Dave Manic's art was exaggerated at times, then just look at the cartoony wonderland that John Gray brings to Mobius. I know some don't jive with this hyper-exaggerated aesthetic, but you know what, buddy? Maybe I don't jive with you! This is wonderful and easily my favorite art style the comic has had thus far, because I swear there's more personality in a single page here than I've seen in some full issues of this comic. From selling Vector and Julie Sue's now more ridiculous rivalry to this one page of Uncle Chuck's Diner, which just embodies this joyful atmosphere. Every single page demands you read it twice, maybe even 3 times just to properly soak in all the details. On a moment-to-moment level, I've never felt more connected to these characters because the art sells all their emotions so well. And regardless of how silly it can look, the amazing thing about John Gray's art, especially when combined with Jason Jensen's beautiful coloring, is the range of emotions and tones he gets out of this style. The moody lighting casting intimidating villains in deep shadows, or the insane action pages giving our heroes extra flair, through things like Sonic twirling a fire sword before an attack, or the perfect pacing of Sonic and Knuckles one-shotting this goon. Perhaps even more importantly though, the art also sells Knuckles' pain during his lowest moments, all while still making jokes land like never before. Something as simple as the cast laughing at Knuckles' new baby brother's horrible name, his name's Nicapion Mace by the way, is so uproarious that it goes from pretty funny to full-on hilarious. Then there's Knuckles' pure burning rage that anyone would make fun of the name, even though he also thinks it's gotta be the worst name he's ever heard. I love these stupid furries. Yep, let's do it to it. Do what? There's this weird attention to detail with Ray ditching his jacket during a fight in the second issue, and then that just carries on for the rest of the story. Or how Saffron is carrying around this doll that sometimes emotes, which really seems to mess with her. Or this bear guard knocking sense into some other bear guard for acting silly on the job only to do it himself. Or Sonic's medical report claiming he has a Cyclops eye. Or LNR SNE. Wait, what the heck does that mean? Dear Sonic fans, do you know whose initials are on the tree in issue 134 of the Archie Sonic the Hedgehog comic? Really want to know. Live nude Robotnik. Sexy naked Eggman. I was young, I needed the money. I am totally not joking, by the way, that's exactly what it was. Certain periods of Archie were lawless. I can't believe I've kept that a secret for years. Anyway, what the heck was I talking about? Well, yeah, even the Fleetway characters get some love. Girls do rule techno. And we're still not done, folks. The great art alone elevates new players like Vanitovus, who instantly comes across as a super serious big bad who's going to cause loads of trouble down the line because, I mean, look at him. This guy's gonna get ya. Returning figures from the Knuckles comic like Lee and Doc quickly go from meh to entertaining forces of pure hatred. Because where before she was just some bad lady I didn't care about and who had this overly complex backstory connected to Julie Sue, now her entire deal, her power-hungry nature and need to be in control, gets refocused and properly contextualized with just one line. A single sketchy image surrounded by all-consuming darkness. Father loved you more. This is where the writing comes in, because it's not just that these issues look good. Nah, the writing is equally full of character, equally snappy yet detailed. Within just 4 issues, the plot zigs and zags all over the place, while still properly exploring these concepts in satisfying ways. Like Sonic, Knuckles, and the Chaotix go to liberate Angel Island, only to find out the Dingoes are now working for Eggman under new leadership. They're even imprisoning the Echidnas in slave pits?
Oh no.
But what's this? The Dark Legion is fighting against them alongside Knuckles' mother as the last line of defense for Angel Island? Knuckles' return from the dead is used to explore his character as his people once again place all their hopes on him, giving him responsibilities far beyond any one person's ability to fulfill, like saving them from Eggman or even returning their blind child's eyesight. But why wouldn't they think he could do that? He came back from the dead, he's their savior, their messiah. S3K101894, baby. Of course though, Knuckles still hasn't even regained his chaos powers. He can barely fight, let alone liberate them. Just being around the Master Emerald is enough to make him sick. Here, Bollers has managed to condense loads of overly complex Pender's lore into a shockingly simple yet effective plotline. For one, we're finally following up on the Dingo's hatred for the Echidnas, and this isn't just some lip service. Now there's a new guy in charge named Cage, who sold the Echidnas out for power and allowed Eggman to take over. Just having someone fresh leading, instead of Stryker, is enough to show us that there was likely some infighting among the Dingoes, but they didn't all want to go along with this. Heck, our boy Harry's back too! Love that guy! Anyway, he's working undercover for our heroes, under constant threat from his superiors. Meanwhile, we explore the Dark Legion's potential as a force for good, while still leaning into how their past mistakes and how other Echidnas' treatment of them has broken them. I mean, Dr. Vanitovus' rant about technology really hits, where he rips into these parents who won't heal their child's eyesight because they have faith Knuckles will, even though the Dark Legion has the technology to fix it. Wow, the Dark Legion is being given nuance in a way that works, intelligently embodied by a handful of characters rather than the overly complex multi-generational conflicts of the past. Then there's the weight of Knuckles' heritage, the brotherhood, the religious tilt to much of the Knuckles comics material. All of it is embodied by Knuckles' place as a so-called avatar. In fact, we've both simplified the narrative and heightened Knuckles' conflict by removing all of the brotherhood but his father, who have mysteriously disappeared while trying to protect the Master Emerald. This weight on Knuckles, this responsibility, it only continues to grow as it becomes more and more clear that he might just be the Echidna's last hope, or at least instrumental in determining if they take back their home or not. Wow, Bollers did it? He made the Knuckles lore as enjoyable to read as it is to think about, because now the subtext is just that, subtext, instead of what the majority of the story spends its time focusing on. Heck, even incredibly obscure characters are back and made into something worthwhile, like Hunter from that weird arc with the yo-yo stealing monkey. At the end of that story, he got captured by the Brotherhood, but I didn't really care because he was simply yet another of the Knuckles comics' many tangents. But now that Eggman is in control of the island, Hunter's been turned into a weapon for the Empire by giving him the tools necessary to indulge in his murderous tendencies. This guy is a genuine menace. He's gathering all the Echidnas and is going to steal the Master Emerald. He needs to be stopped. Knuckles! Knuckles? No! Super Knuckles! It's crunch time! It's crunch time! I think what really sells this last-minute Master Emerald-induced transformation is that, as simple as it sounds, this feels like a victory for Knuckles because he refused to give up. Even in his weakened state, even when the Chaos Energy made him feel so ill he collapsed, he still fought for his people, and through the pain, came out the other side stronger. He wasn't going to get this by staying in Knothole. He had to come back to protect his home in order to gain the power to save it. And the art makes it look like Knuckles is literally ripping the power out of himself as he wills himself to fight. But that right there is the greatest part. Now that Knuckles has his powers back, he can return as the Guardian to Angel Island, right? He can protect his home from any new invasions and keep his people safe until Eggman is defeated down below. As long as Knuckles is next to that big green rock, his people will be safe. But no, Knuckles rejects that path and decides to return to Knothole and help the Freedom Fighters take down Eggman once and for all. Even if it means weakening himself, Knuckles will fight till the whole world is safe. And so he leaves protecting Angel Island to the Dark Legion and more specifically to Locke, the father who he came all this way to save and who now rejects him for turning his back on his home and his duty. It's a bittersweet end to what seemed like such a triumphant finale. And once again, Bollers deserves all the credit in the world for allowing the Knuckles storyline to finally lean into the unspoken aspects of its narrative. In this case, Locke seeing Knuckles as a savior first and a son second. And while I do think Knuckles is making the best of a bad situation here, I also can't entirely blame Locke for the way he feels either. No matter what, Knuckles is making the choice to currently sacrifice some of Angel Island's safety on the bet that he can help defeat Eggman. And Locke's reaction makes it clear he believes this is a permanent choice. It's complicated, it's compelling, and most of all, it's finally entertaining. So this right here, this was so good. My man Bollers is on a roll. He can't be stopped. And if this is the treatment that Knuckles got, then what on Mobius did Bollers bring to the table for the comic's titular hog? Immediately upon Sonic's return, it's clear that something's off. Because though only 6 weeks have passed for Sonic, an entire year has gone by on Mobius. And boy, oh boy, have things changed. First off, with his new robotic family and the android named Mecha and the computer virus Adam, Eggman has even greater control over Mobius. There's a real sense that Eggman is now more threatening than ever before, all while keeping his same twisted sense of humor. Like my man's hiring an assassin to murder a pop star he doesn't like and making it illegal to listen to her music. Or how about when he allows Jeffrey and Hershey to have their marriage ceremony just so he can have the pleasure of murdering them on their wedding day. Then there's his sheer excitement as he announces his latest plan to the whole world. Now that Sonic's back, he's going to launch 2 atomic missiles, one pointed at Knothole and the other at Station Square. But that's not all, as Eggman is sending an army to destroy the barrier surrounding Robotropolis, which will allow the nuclear fallout from Sonic's accidentally killing Nate Morgan days to spread across Mobius. That's right, it's Operation Triple Threat, and our dear doctor has one question for our heroes. Can you tackle it? TTFN suckers! Wait, was that some weird attempt to half swear? Can you imagine the comic letting Sonic characters swear? Shoot!
Impossible!
Yeah, Boulder still has his weirdo sense of humor, and I'm here for it. Stuff like Shadow saying, "Daddy is going to be very sore anyway." Or Knuckles and Sonic broing out about being dead cracks me up every time. That manic energy from the way past insanest era smoothly carries over to this opening section, and even impacts the plot in some fun ways, like with Tails stopping the nuclear countdown by confusing Adam with jokes and riddles. It's also just cathartic to see Tails handle a situation Sonic can't in such a clever way, showing just how far he's come as a vital member of the Freedom Fighters. And while the middle issues of this return home arc are a bit drawn out, the beginning and end are lots of fun, with Bollers fully indulging in that B-list action spectacle he established in Sonic Adventure 2.5. Particularly with Bunny saving Sonic with a nonsensical one-liner or single-handedly decimating a nuclear battleship. Like, by the walkers, she's so cool! They're all so cool! It makes this feel like the grand return it should be. Of course, though, all this is to say that the Freedom Fighters didn't just lie down and let Eggman walk all over them while Sonic was away. But the war has changed some of them. Antoine is no longer the cowardly coyote we all know and that I love. He's a hardened warrior with a wicked scar. He and Bunny even broke up. Wait, no, my sugar twat! Where before this type of change for Antoine felt forced, the time skip context instead leaves me intrigued. It sells the stakes of the situation and makes me desperately want to explore this new Antoine and see if he'll be able to find himself again. Then there's the pleasant surprise of Amy Rose, who's become an absolute powerhouse, using her Pico Pico hammer she got from her magic ring to just demolish bad guys. What's so cool about this is that it intrinsically elevates Amy from little girl who's obsessed with Sonic to a warrior with a big heart who grew to embody the elements of the hero she held so dear. In fact, these are her traits that the comic focuses on when she's officially made a member of the Freedom Fighters. Yeah, as strange as it sounds, Amy never went on missions with them following her Sonic Adventure redesign because the comic stuck to its word that she was too young and inexperienced, despite her aged-up appearance. But thanks to the time skip, we've fast-tracked that development in a bombastic way, while still keeping the catharsis of Amy getting the respect she always wanted and her emotional reaction that follows. It's super endearing, and also a pretty sneaky way to clue the audience into the fact that Amy's age and mentality are now basically the same, sweeping that magic ring business under the rug for the 10 of us who have read all this crap and remember it, but, you know, I appreciated it. So yeah, while the action here is lots of fun, folks like Amy and Antoine make it clear that there's a deeper, more emotional character-based level to this. And that carries over to the other characters too. Like after the day's saved and everything's calmed down, Sonic is able to properly reunite with Tails and give him a message from his long-lost parents. Though a universe separates us from each other, our love for you has no boundaries. Wow, that's actually just really touching. Overall, I really admire the confidence exuded by this arc, as it dramatically changes the stakes and even the characters to sell that time has passed. While I often find that time skips result in me feeling disconnected from the characters, it works shockingly well here. Because while I did have my fun laughing at the way past insanest era, I can only enjoy that kind of thing for so long. In the end, I want the comic to eventually create a new foundation for itself, to become something good holistically, something I can get emotionally invested in. And this time skip and the way the writers have handled it does just that, offering the world, these characters, and even me, a fresh start. Because Sonic is also suitably lost and confused here, overwhelmed by his new status as a death-defying celebrity, forced to deal with how uncomfortable all of this is. The world he left behind, the one he thought he was returning to, it's different now. No matter how fast he rushed back home, he was too slow, and the world has moved on without him. So though there may be celebratory fireworks depicting the good old days, their shadows reveal the cold truth.
What about old times? I guess they're gone. But hey, at least there's still one thing Sonic can count on, or rather, one very special person.
Sonic and Sally got together right before his supposed death, and the comic absolutely nails their reunion with Sonic's rush towards Sally depicted surprisingly well with these detailed POV shots. So they embrace, they're together again, and Sally happily says she always knew Sonic would return to her. Man, does it feel good to see this picking up right where it left off instead of getting backtracked again. Now the relationship can be stronger and we can finally explore something new for them. How will they handle this relationship in the long term? Heck, Sonic's even gonna be Sally's consort. Oh yeah, and her dad's finally showing her some respect? He's going on a trip and leaving her in charge as a ruler? He believes in her? Nice. This is the first time the comics felt like it fully knows what it's doing with Sally since anyway, better late than never, right? And as this guy sets off these wicked fireworks of our favorite couple's reunion, it feels like a real celebration of their relationship, a promise to the fans that it's time to do it to... It's here, folks. The slap. The slap that solidifies this post-space era not as the promising new beginning for the story that it by all rights should have finally been, but a slap in the face to the audience at large. But let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet, and focus on the moment itself. Now, most Archie Sonic fans hate this scene, and I think that usually stems from a basic disdain of Sally because she hurt Sonic here. Like, she physically went at him in a way that's over the top, sure, but this isn't a comedic scene. Nah, she just hit him when he gave her a serious, honest, and difficult response to her asking him to step down from fighting Eggman in order to rule as a leader alongside her. Beyond that, Sonic is just correct. He can't choose her over the world. He's a hero, and Mobius needs him right now. However, while the slap makes this moment more extreme, I actually don't think it's the biggest problem here. No, the biggest problem is that I feel zero sympathy for Sally. Even though she's clearly suffering from some sort of trauma, even though she's clearly unstable and scared, and even though the things she says should read as a cry for help or something she doesn't mean, I can't give her the benefit of the doubt. I don't want to. And it all stems from one question I've been holding back this entire retrospective. Who even is Sally Acorn? Well, in the beginning, she started off as a somewhat temperamental character that slowly grew into a more competent and clever leader of the freedom fighters. Then she became a daughter obsessed with saving her father. Then she died. But even if it was meant to be a permanent death, it was forced to become a fake-out. For whatever reason, she was given a second chance at life, and fans of a character who they could have lost forever were granted more time with her. At the time, I was excited at that prospect and happy for the fans. So what did the writers choose to do with her? I hope this isn't an omen that I'm destined to have those I love taken from me. I'd hate it if I lost my teachers, friends, or especially Daddy. Throughout this whole comic, Sally has been through a lot. She's had to try and sidestep her father's worst policies to keep the kingdom in balance, and her dad's also made it clear he's going to choose her mate, so she's lost her romance with Sonic. She's been told that her destiny is already decided for her, that the freedom she fought for is something she herself will never have due to some nebulous source of all. She's been forced to distance herself from her friends. She's cried herself to sleep, alone and afraid and confused. Each moment of hope for her is matched by one twice as hopeless. A rejection of her fate instead turns to her fate being forced upon her more. Sneaking out of the castle to finally be with Sonic instead results in an obnoxious miscommunication that goes on for issue after issue. An acceptance of a relationship that should have happened many issues ago turns to loss as Sonic seemingly dies. And a touching reunion and her father finally accepting her turns to pain as, even after getting back what she held so dear, she can't help but fear that, just like with so many other things in her life, she will lose this too. Is this slap something that Sally would do? I don't know. I'm surprised she chose to have this discussion in front of a crowd full of people. Surprised that she didn't wait for a more private moment, considering that she's often kept her most sensitive feelings to herself. But can I truly say it's out of character? No. She does this because she can't have a victory. She does this with an audience because that makes this not only a personal failure, but a failure as a leader too. Even in Sally's most heartfelt stories during this era, she's made to suffer, to lay alone under the stars in the sky and realize that she's looking at them for the first time. Crying as she understands that she can't even appreciate what's directly in front of her. She spent so long looking down that looking up is foreign to her. She writes that she's coped with what happened between her and Sonic and that she'll now devote herself to her people. But would you look at that? She actually does want to be with Sonic again, but she's not going to do it because Daddy is still saying no. Whether it's preordained or luck of the draw, for better or worse, this is my destiny. Sally is like this because ever since she came back to life, no, since the first time she got a single story that wasn't a joke, Sally has been made for one thing. Sally Acorn is only here to suffer. All of this should make me sympathize with Sally, and as you know, some of these moments did. While I've never actually been the biggest fan of Sally, she's had some fun scenes sprinkled here and there that were pretty likable, interesting, or cool. There was potential, but that's all it is. Potential. So overall, when Sally's mental state is reset over and over and over, no way, I don't care about her. It's not interesting to watch her hit Sonic because she's scared. It's not interesting to hear her justify her dad's attempt to genocide the Robian population, saying that she may have considered it herself if she was in his position. But don't worry about it because she's supposed to be depicted as being irrational here. Princesses, am I right, fellas? Sally breaks off her friendship with Knuckles in this issue too, so what's gonna happen? Don't worry about it. We never bring this up again, and they're cool now. We'll figure out what this character's deal is eventually. Yeah, I purposely left out that little story until now because it sets the precedent for this post-space era. Despite all the reasons I should feel sympathy for her, I can't bring myself to because the comic consistently frames her as someone who lashes out at every little thing when Karl Bollers writes her, except when she doesn't and is actually pretty relaxed and cool when Romy Shakam writes her. Except when she's not because now Ken Penders is writing her, so she passively allows Sonic to be arrested because her new husband says so with not a single ounce of regret as she instead laments that she'll never have the fairy tale ending she's always wanted with Sonic, but that she never, ever works to achieve. But hey, she's really stressed, guys. Like, always. And I have to ask, does the comic want me to hate Sally? Her suffering, her trauma, if it has to be here, should be a story. It should go somewhere. But instead it comes across as a bid to make her as unsympathetic as possible because she's so incompetent, and more than that, inconsistent. And with the slap, this is confirmed. Sally's suffering isn't part of an arc. It won't have a conclusion. No, it's the status quo. The comic won't allow Sally to win because she's not a character. She's a force of drama, a conflict to fall back on again and again and again when the writers run out of ideas. We could have and should have done something new. We could have seen where this romance between Sonic and Sally would go. We could have seen if Sally would be able to become a proper ruler. Or you know what? Maybe we could have just dropped the act. We could have finally given Sonic his overly sexualized paper-thin prize that the comic has always treated Sally as and been done with it. Whatever. Put her back in the castle to cry about it. This romance plot isn't something running in the background either. No. If anything, now Sonic's fun adventures fighting villains like Eggman are the true tangent, because the story is committed to being a melodramatic romance stuck in the never-ending will they won't they hell. And I just don't care. I don't care about Mina Mongoose's stupid boyfriend who hates Sonic but learns to not be so possessive and trust his girlfriend and blah, blah, blah. I don't care about Sonic making out with Bunny or Sonic dating Fiona Fox to cope over Sally. I don't care that Tails wants to date Fiona because of his crush on her robot double, and I especially don't care about this forced drama that comes out of it. Why does the comic think I care about who Sonic smooches? Stop the madness, do something else! These ideas are bad and the execution is equally dreadful, with plenty of the comic's worst habits on full display. Lengthy and unnecessary self-narration? Check. Awkward exposition? You bet. An overabundance of largely charmless dialogue drowning out the page? What did you expect, dummy? At almost every turn, this comic now manages to walk back the promise of this new beginning, making it clear that all the time skip's most interesting ideas were temporary, and that balance will be restored. So what is balance for Archie Sonic? Well, it's spending a strange amount of time on a side character I couldn't care less about, like Tommy Turtle, the dude who apparently taught Sonic the meaning of friendship. Unfortunately for all of us, he didn't actually die before, so now we need to spend 3 issues on a story about him. A story where Sonic unknowingly brings a robotic version of him home. He tries to kill Sonic, but his dad Jules gets in the way, saving his life. What a Chad. But oh no, seems you won't make it. Never mind that though, wait. Sonic grabs a power ring and saves him, learning that he shouldn't take his parents for granted. Again. Yeah, we've done that before, haven't we? Anyway, he and the gang go to save the real Tommy Turtle. What's his personality like? Well, he's a nice turtle. Gets some nanobots stuck on him accidentally. He's, maybe smart, I guess? I don't know. I do not know what the appeal of Tommy Turtle is, and I don't know why we're spending so much time on him. What is balance for Archie Sonic? What stories and characters no longer making sense? Like Shadow the Hedgehog. What's this guy all about? I mean, we never actually got an adaptation of his story. Instead, we were told to play the game, but that doesn't make sense because this isn't the same world as the games. Whatever though, he's here now. So long as we stick with that, then wait, we're retconning that? Wait, Shadow doesn't know Robotnik and Gerald were related and that causes him to join with Eggman? But he knew that before. Yeah, I gotta say, I have no clue who Archie Shadow even is, but that won't stop us from spending 8 issues on him and still not being able to even nail down the basic premise of his character. Something that is pretty darn important for getting me to, care. But no, instead we spend the Shadow stories on a 5-issue lore dump that literally can't be true because God already told us the lore before. Come on, Ken.
Freedom fighters don't resort to using guns of any kind. Never have, never will.
This guy doesn't use guns? This guy can? This big mama jama guy can? That you wrote can? This guy! At least Sonic telling Shadow to get laid is pretty funny though. Sounds more like a lapse in the synapse in that noggin of yours. Maybe if you tried meditation, or maybe found yourself a girl, you might get a handle on all that pent up aggression. Ooh, thanks, Ken. So what's balance for Archie Sonic? Well, it's Eggman remaining a charismatic and maniacal presence in the background. Yeah, while we've been focusing on all this other crap, Eggman is relegated to the B or even C stories of these issues, either doing almost nothing or trying to figure out the identity of a completely separate antagonist named Anonymous. Which means that after the first arc, Sonic and Eggman don't interact for almost the entire era. It gets so bad that Adam ends up creating more problems for the Freedom Fighters than Robotnik himself. Like this virus uses the Doctor's nanotechnology to create a living city that will consume all of Mobius in a matter of days, or he infiltrates the bodies of various robotic characters, all of his own volition. So yeah, now even one of the characters I've consistently loved is being sidelined for 2 new bad guys that I really don't have much of a reason to care about. I couldn't care less about all these new ideas. I mean, of all the fuck. What is balance for Archie Sonic? Well, it's a bunch of B stories that are only here to fill out the page count since nothing is ever happening. This should be fun. Why isn't it fun? But no, instead we spend 2 issues learning about the original Freedom Fighters. What do we learn about them? Well, we see the reason they all died was because one of their teammates betrayed them because, and I quote, "I'm a snake. It's totally within my nature." What is balance for Archie Sonic? Well, it's a lack of communication between writers. Because remember how Antoine changed during the war? That seemed like an interesting direction for his character. A great idea. We even get a story of him looking back at some of his relationship with Bunny and he isn't doing good. He's an upset fella. But wait, that story was a lie. Because this isn't Antoine. Nah, now it's been decided by someone else that this is actually evil Antoine from that alternate dimension with the evil Sonic. He swapped roles with our Antoine. Something that's revealed, by the way, in the comic's 150th issue. Heck of a celebratory milestone, huh? Showing your story doesn't make any sense anymore. Showing evil Sonic hitting on Bunny. Man, at one point I might have found this funny, but the moment-to-moment writing here is so dreadful, so boring, that I just don't anymore. Maybe if the art was bad, I'd get a laugh, but no. If anything, the art is too good now. Fry, Mawini, Butler, heck, even Ron Lim are killing it. All of these artists have really come into their own, only to have that wasted on this, and this, and this, and... what is that? But my Antoine complaint runs even deeper than it not making sense, because Antoine changing as a person was way more compelling to me than this stupid plot twist, even if it had been perfectly executed. I don't care about evil Antoine or evil Sonic, and I certainly don't care about this alternate dimension. Then this turns into a big plot where evil Antoine is poisoning Antoine's dad and King Max so that he can take the throne for himself by marrying Sally. So again, this isn't something you can ignore. This is a major plot point, a key part of the story, and it doesn't even get the most basic of basics right. Anyway, how's this arc wrapped up? Does Sally come into her own and say she can't marry Antoine? Does she maybe figure out that this is evil Antoine? Nah, of course not. Instead, Sally's brother Elias swoops in at the last minute and fixes everything by claiming his right to the throne. Not out of a desire for power, but a feeling of responsibility to protect his people in these crazy times, even if he never wanted the throne. And maybe even more importantly, he does this to save his sister from a destiny she never wanted. I abandoned the crown because of love, and now it's because of love that I must accept it. That's my king. Yeah, Elias is as cool as ever. Love that guy. But here's the thing. I might love him, but where did he come from? Like, if we were going to tell a story where he's the hero, maybe he should have been at the center of it from the start instead of pretending once more that we were going to focus on Sonic and Sally. But wait, I wouldn't care about that either, because we all know by now that this isn't going anywhere, right? I swear, every moment that makes me hopeful for this comic is undercut by something stupid. Anyway, real Antoine's back. Glad we spent 25 issues without him for some guy who doesn't do anything. Sacre bleu! If it somehow isn't obvious by now, the comic is spinning its wheels, and in a lot of ways feels like it's just given up entirely. Like, even it's surprised that it's still going and thus scrambling to find anything to do. After Return to Angel Island, which is pretty early into this era, Bollers vanishes for a good while before writing a two-parter with Mina, and that's it. Meaning the majority of the main comic was in the hands of Ken Penders, who has admitted that if it weren't for his son being such a fan, he'd have left much earlier for better opportunities. Eventually quitting the book after he'd had enough of Sega's lack of communication, in this case regarding how to write Shadow. Beyond that though, at this point I had almost zero characters or stories that I wanted to see more of besides Eggman. Just like the story itself, I was completely checked out. Well, I say that, but there was one story left. One story we need to discuss. A story that's been a long time coming and that I need to see through to the end. A tale for this time.
So what's it all mean? After all this time, can't even you tell me?
That's right, folks. All the foreshadowing and build-up about Tails having a prophecy given to him by the Ancient Walkers is coming to pass. This little guy is destined to unify all the Chaos Emeralds and to save the world from an ultimate evil. What is that evil? It's Mammoth Mogul. Yeah, never cared for this guy too much. But hey, this is a neat setup. Turns out Mogul was the one who made fake Tails and had him get dunked on by Green Knuckles. Didn't mention that story before because it was really boring, and oh yeah, I guess this means fake Tails did get brought up again, though Tails doesn't seem to care. Anyway, Mogul's basically got the power of a god now from absorbing Green Knuckles' power, and he's going from dimension to dimension, destroying them all. He'll get rid of the Ancient Walkers and create his own world from there. The only one who can stop him is Tails. But the prophecy never specified which one apparently, so Sonic the Zone Cop has gathered many Tails scattered across many dimensions, and now they're going to need to fight Mogul. We're here, a climactic capstone to the comic's longest running plotline, established back in the Tails miniseries in 1995. Yep, in the gag era. I've been waiting for over 150 issues. Sonic is dead? All the Tails are combining. Okay, let's see where this goes. Rise, Titan Tails. Huh. Yeah, that's, I would have expected to find that funny. We didn't even actually fulfill the prophecy since Tails didn't unify the Chaos Emeralds. Yeah. Tails turns into a giant buff Tails and reverse farts Mogul into his butt over the course of basically a single page after, again, 150 issues of build-up. And yet, no, I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing.
The Archie Sonic comic can't ever just be good, can it? It always has to be good with an asterisk. The Robo-Robotnik return is great if you have the patience to reread it and ignore the 25-plus issues of drop plot points, never-ending exposition, and a focus on annoying side characters that made it feel meaningless in the first place. The way past Insanest Era was a blast, just wackiness and insanity with some genuinely heartfelt moments. You know, if you skip reading the Knuckles comic that spins its wheels for its entire run and ends on the message that all of it was pointless since its entire conceit never ended up going anywhere. Time well spent, I'd say. Talking. Dropped plot point after dropped plot point after dropped plot point. The joy I've found in this comic is always in retrospect, in dissection, and carving out the most painless path possible to find as many little moments of joy that a reader of this comic might accidentally stumble into if they're in the right headspace at the time. And while I've of course hammed up my frustrations for emphasis and comedy, the sad fact is that every time I've read this particular era, I'm left with this feeling that I've never had while reading the rest of this comic. For the first time, the Archie Sonic comic is boring. Meanwhile, it's not an exaggeration at all when I tell you that I seriously wanted to drop this comic multiple times. Once during Endgame, once during the World Adventure, thanks Knuckles, once during the way past Insanest Era, thanks again Knuckles, and once again here in this post-space era. And yet I kept being good faith about it, and I allowed the asterisk to get bigger and bigger. And that's really the heart of the matter, isn't it? I've really tried to be good faith here, to point out all the things the comic does right or that I enjoyed. But I think it's time to just admit something to myself and to you. This comic is not good. In fact, it's one of the most disappointing and frustrating things I've ever read. A story that started off with something I genuinely enjoyed, with a tone and character I connected with, and slowly undercut all of its good ideas until now, we're left with a story that just doesn't know what it even wants to be. It'll spin its wheels, it'll lie, and the saddest thing is that I've come to this exact same conclusion 3 times in this retrospective. It never ends. Now this might get you wondering, why have you tried so hard to enjoy this? A fair question with a simple answer. I started this series because I promised someone I would read it. So we went through it in order together, we talked about it, and we had a great time in those conversations, commiserating over our anger and disappointment with so many of these stories, and reveling in the moments of fun and charm that only became rarer as time went on. But still, it was clear that the comic was bad. Past the gag era, this retrospective would have been complaint after complaint after complaint. So we did our best to channel all the annoyance and anger into some cheeky fun. But there was something more to this that kept me going too. The potential, the cool ideas, the promising moments, the sometimes phenomenal art, the hope. All of the praise I've given this comic is real, and no matter what, I don't want to take away from the good and sometimes great stories these characters and these creatives brought to the table. It's just a fact, however, that I only found those things by hyper-focusing on those positives and doing everything I could to bring them out. Skipping Knuckles, ignoring B stories, rereading to find the best details. Moments I would have never properly enjoyed came into focus as I read it again and again and again. But now with this era, it truly feels like the comic has just given up. It doesn't want to keep going anymore. Put it out of its misery, please. And maybe I would find that more forgivable if there weren't so many good ideas. If there weren't prior stories where no matter how bad they were, I always got the sense that the creatives were truly trying. With Endgame, with the World Adventure, with Knuckles, there were neat ideas and things that felt like passion, right? They communicated that to me. Someone cared. But not here. The comic is a hollow shell of itself. And that's even considering all the problems it had in the first place. But there was one more reason I kept going. There was the promise. The promise of Flynn. Ian Flynn. Pretty good chance you've heard of him considering his prolific status as a Sonic writer. The big Sonic savior even, everybody. Every time I wanted to give up, I was told it would all be worth it because this man becomes the head writer, steering the series in a great direction. However, after reading this section of the comic, I just can't do it anymore. I barely care if this comic gets better. Then there's the fact that I've read over 150 issues of the main comic, plus what feels like an infinite amount of obnoxious plotting spin-offs, and we just wasted the perfect opportunity for the story to become something truly great. So no, Flynn can't just come in and only make the comic better. He can't slowly find his footing with the characters and create some decent stories because he's new to this. I need this comic to become immediately fantastic. And even if it's fantastic, I highly doubt it will make this worth it. Because I find no joy in the thought that I sat through perpetual frustration just to get to some soft reboot that leaves everything behind to start fresh with some loose connections to the past. Because that's all this comic can do, right? How could you salvage this? How could you make this great without abandoning all the baggage? Frankly, I don't think you can.
I'm all out of good faith, and I've finally learned to despise Archie Sonic.
So lay it on me, Flynn. Wow me. Surprise me. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's way past too late to.
If there's one Sonic writer you've no doubt heard of, it's Ian Flynn. As I mentioned earlier, he's easily the most prolific Sonic storyteller to date, creating a massive amount of Sonic adventures from his beginnings on the comic in 2006 all the way up to the current day. Eventually, he even wrote for the mainline game Sonic Frontiers, but how did he get here? Well, still in college and working on his degree in English, Flynn thought, hey, why not? And ended up sending Archie a bunch of unsolicited scripts until he got hired on as the head writer of his favorite comic. He even got to ghostwrite some of the last pages of Ken Penders' final issue, which becomes pretty obvious in hindsight as Sonic starts referring to Shadow as Faker, a clear callback to the games that self-admitted non-Sonic fan Ken Penders would have never done. More than any of the other prior Archie Sonic writers, Ian Flynn was a true blue Sonic fan, obsessed with not only the games but the comic itself, having grown up with both. I mean, you can even find fan mail from him in the comic's letter pages under Ian Pato. But this guy isn't just gushing about his favorite characters or submitting ideas he'd like the comic to explore. No, he's writing full-on essays that are so huge that the editor mentions they sadly couldn't fit it all in. They're basically page-by-page discussions. Heck, Flynn even dissects the potential motives of the wishy-washy Dimitri storyline, trying to use subtext to understand this character, where someone like me just outright dismissed it as poor writing. There's a clear passion for this comic, but there's also a seriousness, a genuine consideration of it, treating it with respect, and refusing to write it off. A desire to go deeper into these characters and their world. Along with that, there's this loving appreciation for those who work on the series, like Dawn Best. Similar to Flynn, she was also a fan of the Sonic comic before joining as an artist for the series when she won an art contest Penders ran during the latter half of the Green Knuckles saga. Her more squishy designs are pretty darn cute, and she definitely adds some intimacy to these little moments with the characters reflecting on their relationship with Knuckles. If very little else was good about the Green Knuckles arc, Dawn's art at least brought some emotion, which at that point, it desperately needed. But really, my praise pales in comparison to what Mr. Ian Pato had to say. Dawn Best is definitely a talented artist. Her drawings help convey the words instead of just standing there saying things totally unrelated to their body language. What I saw was brilliant. It was also so good to see that dreams can come true in this cynical world where dreams are often forgotten, misplaced, or destroyed. Thank you. There's a joy here that's unmistakable, a love for this series and its creators. And that love was immediately evident with Flynn's first full Archie Sonic story, Birthday Bash. As the title implies, it's Sonic's birthday and his friends are giving him something special to celebrate the occasion. A reconstructed version of their old clubhouse. Yep, the one from the gag era days. All the way back in issue 1. Yeah, right away, Flynn's desire to pull from the comic's past is self-evident. But it's not just some superficial callback. No, the clubhouse has been updated. There are now more friends than ever before to enjoy it, and it will continue to be our hero's base for the remainder of the series. Plus, with Eggman's narrow-minded focus on Sonic and his friends, the Freedom Fighters can use this location to direct his attacks away from their loved ones back in Knothole, which is just a jog away. So no, this isn't some sad bid from the comic to return to better times with a quick callback. Instead, it's a well-considered return to simpler times, bolstered by an implicit optimism. We might not be able to go entirely back, but we can have fun again. Really, this entire two-parter feels like a love letter to the gag era, with Eggman sending Bean and Bark as birthday presents to kill Sonic, complete with a song. Or how about having the villain use the comic's logo when referring to our titular hog? The Great Oak Slide is wielded as a weapon. There's this really high concept but equally stupid background gag of Tails squinting to see Shadow. You know, like he's a shadow he can't make out. I love this dumb comic. And of course, there's charming dialogue. But where the gag era preferred puns to punctuate Sonic's personality, now there's a cocky wit to each of his actions.
So, Blue, how old are you now?
Well, if we take his trip into space into account.
Let's call me a teen from now till forever.
Sonic is just so charismatic here, having a blast even when things are stacked against him. Then there's just how happy he is to be a part of the Freedom Fighters and his faith that if they all work together, they can do anything. And that infectious fun is perfectly sold by the other star of this two-parter, newcomer artist Tracy Yardley. I'm gonna have a lot to say about Yardley's style as it evolves over the course of the comic, but even his early work is incredibly strong. It has many of the qualities I love about John Gray's work. Over-the-top expressions, fast-paced paneling, and background details that make the world feel alive. But where John Gray focuses more on embodying one specific emotion for a scene spread throughout the entire cast, Yardley focuses more on each unique personality existing on its own. And I love his approach here. For now though, the main thing I want to praise about Yardley is his ability to make the act of reading the comic just effortlessly fun. For example, Sonic gets hit on the final panel of this page, so it truly feels like Tails is catching him from that one into the next, with the way Sonic is even moving into this panel now. Then Sonic gets into this action stance in the background, appearing super small, only for my eye to go to the word bubble below as Sonic is pinning Bean in the foreground. Only after that do I look back to see where Sonic came from, giving the sense that Sonic was too fast for me to even keep track of, as he's already completed this action before I could even register it. For another example, in a later scene, we catch up as Locke fights a couple foes. When he finally loses his composure, the center panel gets sketchy, like his emotional burst of chaos energy is affecting the page itself. Finally, as that foe too uses chaos power, now it's time for his panels to crack and shift. Then in a later issue, Knuckles is battling Dr. Finitibus. On the surface, it's a simple back and forth, with both combatants completing each other's sentences as they give a variation of a spell, ending in a clash. But the paneling adds so much excitement and energy to that as I soak it all in. As I notice the two circling each other, as I notice Knuckles' arrows of energy going into the other panel, as I notice these speed lines are actually the clouds from the middle panels blurring into the background, and as I notice the way the light from their clash shoots up to the top of the page until it disperses at the start of their fight, tying the whole image together. And the more I look for this kind of thing in the comic, the more I'm rewarded for it. The more I realize how rich and detailed the art is. The more I realize why, from here forward, so many scenes feel so exciting. And the thing is, I could just keep going. As I went through this era, I began to notice that almost every page has something like this that gives the comic life. On a more basic but equally important level though, there's the fact that even when the comic isn't doing anything all that clever in the earlier issues, the comic is so easy to read because we usually stick to only having about 4 or 5 panels per page. When combined with the snappy, well-paced, and well-placed dialogue, it makes reading effortless. And if I do want to slow down, I'm rewarded with extra characterization. Like Tails comforting a sad Fiona, or Shadow saying that he's still Sonic's enemy, but his little smile betraying his words. While it's also in a later issue, I love this story of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles discovering a Chow garden and just enjoying their time with them. With Sonic deciding that each of their personal Chow needs to have a ch at the start of their names, which yes, means Knuckles' is named Chuckles. But wait, Eggman is attacking. What could the madman want with these poor Chow?
Out of the way, Sonic! I've detected high levels of mystical energy here, and I plan on drilling it for my own purposes. If you insist on getting in the way, please do so under the drill. I hate to break it to you, Eggman, but there's nothing here but the Chow in their Chow garden.
That's what you detected.
What, then there's no magic rings? Nope. Chaos emeralds? Nuh-uh. Power gems? Didn't you invent those? Did I ask about magic rings? Yes and no. Oh. Then I guess I'll settle for wanton destruction. I'll remember this! Whatever. We bad!
We bad.
Cause if I bad and you bad,
Then we bad. Oh, and then Sonic takes all the Chow home to Knothole, and one of them becomes Jules' pet, which turns him into an Omo Chow, which is just so much fun and clever, and yeah, wow, I'm having a blast! Like, I know I've called this comic fun many times and for many reasons before, but if I had to narrow down what makes the Flynn Era stand head and shoulders above the rest of the comic's fun stories, it's just how dense it is with that fun, and how frequently it makes me grin as I read. And though most of the comic moving forward won't be as single-mindedly focused on simple fun as Birthday Bash and this Chow story, it is still consistently entertaining and funny. I mean, some of these facial expressions alone are enough to make me crack up. Look how disgusted Tails is that Snively tracks each of his precious hairs. Oh boy. Overall though, this two-parter feels like a heartfelt apology for how badly the comic wasted Sonic's last birthday, where Sonic's return home from his world adventure and birthday celebration were shuffled off to the side, a single page in an issue that spent its time focusing on so much other stuff instead. Well, here we actually just
spend time on Sonic. And sure, that might sound simple or basic, but when the story is this carefully constructed, this well written, and this energetic and entertaining, it means a lot. And using a birthday for this is really smart. After all, it's such a natural point in our lives where something changes. You're different now, you're growing up. And that subtext can be felt, signaling to me that this is a new beginning. Again, but the difference is that this time, this is real. This is honest. And instead of focusing on many different characters as more important than Sonic, the comic uses those characters to give both Sonic and the readers a great reason to laugh and smile.
Alone we were threats, combined we are a nightmare. Tremble in fear at the terror of Croctobot.
No, stop. Time out. No, that's not Sonic talking. That's me talking. It's him, but it's me too. It's us, but yes. Oh, you don't remember these two losers? Can't blame ya. The prior writers didn't either, or at least didn't care enough to bring them back. Octobot is simple. He got beat up and scurried away. But Crocbot is different. After all, we spent quite a bit of time dealing with him, making a point that he was captured and even having Sonic note that his remains had been stolen. Just another drop plot point in a sea of drop plot points. But now he's back. And why am I so happy? After all, I never liked this guy. He was way too self-serious and the issues surrounding him never made him properly terrifying, even though they sure wanted to convince me that he was supposed to be. So what's the value in his return? Well, that's the thing. The comic is going to lean into that. Crocbot still thinks he's terrifying and fearsome. He still wants to grandstand. But Sonic's not having it. Nah, he can't take this guy seriously. What could be lamer than this combo? Man, his reaction, it's basically exactly the same as mine. Then there's the obvious implication that Eggman just found Crocbot's remains and decided that literally slapping him on top of another robot was good enough to kill Sonic on his birthday. It really feels like even Eggman is just viewing him as an afterthought. Then there's the way the other characters team up to instantly defeat Croctobot because he's getting in the way of their fight. You know, inserting himself where he doesn't belong, he's kind of an expert at that. And they just kill him in a single panel. A joyous punchline and send off for a character I assume the comic had forgotten and that would never reward me for remembering. It's so satisfying, and a perfect example of the true magic of this era. No matter who they were, no matter when they appeared across the comic's 200 plus issues, and no matter how little anyone in their right mind would have cared, these long forgotten characters and nuisances from the past are going to return. And when that happens, they're going to be given as big and loud of an applause as our main cast. Flynn truly embraces that the world of Archie Sonic is the main character, because for a fan like him, it all matters.
I was a fan of the book since the early number 30s. I read religiously. I was a huge fan of the series and all its twists and turns and oddities. And so when I was brought on board, I was on hallowed ground.
Welcome to The Darkest Storm, a 3-part Sonic the Hedgehog war arc with a scope only matched by its number of editor's notes. A story where a mind-boggling number of plot lines and characters would either be pointed in a new direction or meet their end. It's a saga that may not seem all that special for those who haven't read the prior material. In fact, it'll probably be downright confusing at times. But as someone who has read literally every issue leading to this, well, it's one of the most uniquely gratifying stories I've ever experienced. The premise is simple. A bunch of people are fighting over the magical crown and sword of Acorn, and that simplicity allows ample room to focus on the combatants themselves, where they came from and where they're going. So let's start off nice and easy now with the death of God. That's right, the Ancient Walkers are back, my friends, the trio of dinosaurs wearing tiki masks who became gods after they were exposed to chaos energy. They've watched over Mobius since then. Sometimes they've helped us and literally brought people back from the dead. Most of the time, though, they've done nothing, or far worse, wasted my time, undercut the tension, and erased conflicts as a lazy deus ex machina. But this is where Flynn comes in. See, back during the Green Knuckles saga, the Guardian Aether mentioned that the Ancient Walkers are dying. He then didn't elaborate, and this was never mentioned again. However, now, 65 issues later, Flynn finally gives a reason. The Ancient Walkers were struck down by Mammoth Mogul using the last of his power after he had first become a god. If you recall, during that encounter, the Ancient Walkers manipulated events and our heroes into doing their dirty work. But now we're learning that this wasn't some one-off event. No, the Walkers actually cursed Mogul from the very beginning, a curse which caused him to make fatal mistakes that would keep him from ultimate power. That's right, Mogul constantly getting screwed over at the last second, always being the butt of the joke in every story he's in. Now it's explicitly a curse from the gods, a way of influencing destiny without fully controlling it themselves. But this act is what eventually allowed Mogul to strike back, as their unwillingness to fully commit to taking him down themselves to protect Mobius gave him this opportunity, which is what led to their slow march towards death. While the Walkers had prepared a trap for Mogul through the Chosen One, all their efforts would be undone if they died, as their curse on Mogul would fade with them. So to combat this, Tails' uncle Merlin the Wizard has sought out the last of the most powerful magical items on Mobius, the Crown and Sword of Acorns, two plot devices I sure haven't heard about for a long while and that sure were unceremoniously dropped a while back. And who took that sword so long ago? The Orphans of Uma Arachnis. These spider kids and their mom's motivation had always been somewhat up in the air, but they're back and up to something, bringing the sword to Eggman's base, so they can take advantage of his latest attempt to siphon power from the Zone of Silence. Here they lift the sword toward the heavens, bathed in golden light, cutting through the fabric of reality as it's finally revealed what all that talk of genetic memory was about long ago. Uma's children inherited their mother's loyalty to a long-forgotten character trapped in a long-forgotten zone. Ixis Naugus. The harsh dimensional breach is just enough to push the ancient walkers past their limit.
No! Fates preserve us.
Thank you all. With your support and this promising beginning, we may now... Uncle Merlin! A valiant attempt, Sage the Prower, but your efforts were too little, too late. Let's Mother Trunkin' go! Yow! Wow, this is kinda awesome. Taking these often uselessly godly beings and making their own in action their undoing, it's really clever. And really satisfying to see them meet their end at the hands of a character I've wanted to be cool but who never got the chance because of outside interference. Mogul, this villain who couldn't shut up before, silently incapacitates his enemies now. That pride, which was once hammered into the reader's skull through wordiness, is now shown through the confidence of a man who doesn't even view these people as worth a word. In no time, Mogul amasses his army of villainy, immediately acquiring the Sword of Acorns as well. The panels themselves buckle under Mogul's power and solidify at his satisfaction. So is all hope lost? Well, to that, I say,
This force badge shows up.
Horseman, is that you? That's right, everyone. Sir Connery is back. Last time we saw him was in issue 45, where he saved Knuckles and was like, I work for the Walkers. I'm going to kill evil sorcerers with the Sword of Light now. Bye. And we never saw or mentioned him again. Until now. Until he was needed most. Until he could wield the Sword of Light to combat the corrupted Sword and Crown of Acorns himself. Combined together, all of this creates an incredibly over-the-top, insane, self-fulfilling prophecy for both Mogul and the Walkers. As soon as Mogul is free from their curse, his single-minded desire to finally achieve his goal without anyone to stand in his way takes over. Except there is someone who stands in his way. Much like us, perhaps he forgot, or perhaps this prideful pachyderm didn't think he was worth the thought. But this Lone Ranger, dedicated to the cause of his fallen gods, is here to take up their will and continue their fight. And let's go!
All right, Sir Connery, let's do it to it.
Stay out of this for once in your miserable life, you insufferable wretch.
Hey, no fair.
Your patron spirits are no more, Connery. You are at my mercy.
Nay, Mogul, they are with me now in my final act. They gave me this, the Sword of Light, blessed with the power to destroy the darkness. I am sorry, my king. I must destroy the source of all. I am Sir Connery, paladin of the ancient walkers, bringer of the light and enemy of the darkness.
And they chastise me for my verbosity.
By the power invested in me, by the highest of powers.
No.
Come on, Sir Connery, show him how it's done, old school. I smite thee!
No! The Horseman is dead? All of this is just bonkers. Everything in this arc is cranked up to 11 as we repurpose past plot contrivances, transforming them into this climax of this abstract back and forth between cosmic beings. And even though Mogul once again attains cosmic power only to lose it, it actually feels like there was a real cost. The gods, along with their toys and their soldier, are dead. More importantly, however, is how we've addressed one of the key problems with Mogul. After all, pretty much every time he's appeared before, either the art or the writing has totally undermined Mogul's demigod status. And that's not the case here. James Fry is on another level this arc, with striking visuals on every single page, making the moment-to-moment reading experience every bit as grand as the concepts themselves. Sir Connery's sudden entrance as he grips the sword, prepared to face his foe, a clash between a god with stolen power and a man wielding a sword of faith. The art brings it all home and pulls me into the moment. However, even with the sword destroyed, our heroes still must face a Chaos Emerald-enhanced Mogul and his army. After all this, after someone literally died to stop him, he still stands to face our heroes. He still commands incredible power.
What a coincidence! So do I. Fire at will!
That's right, the Doctor is here too. So, what's he been up to during the rest of this arc? Well, for the most part, Eggman has just been reacting to all the insanity around him. And to add insult to injury, they don't even see him as a threat. Yeah, these would-be gods need not worry about him. Except that Dr. Eggman always leaves his mark. Because by the end of the arc, these beings of might and magic are brought to their knees by this madman of science, as the Doctor uses his teleportation technology from Returned Angel Island to collect a new batch of living batteries to power his empire. Here, Eggman has re-established why he's such a threat in the first place, after so many issues of him just waffling around in the prior era. And that's sold even harder because this tech was established a long time ago. My man's been here and survived this long for a reason. You can't just show up and throw him out of his story. And after this, he leaves our heroes with a dark reminder that he could wipe them off the map, but he will do so on his time because this is his game and his world. Never underestimate Dr. Eggman. Once again, the art sells his sadistic glee with these exaggerated and sometimes even gross expressions. I adore every shot of this guy, and it's yet another example of how the presentation elevates this arc's ideas. But there's another villain I haven't yet given due focus, Ixis Naugus. Because yeah, he hangs around after the orphans get him out of the Zone of Silence. So what are we going to do with him? I mean, last time I saw him was in the World Adventure and he sucked there. While here, he mainly exists to prop up Mogul's power, which could easily feel unsatisfying, and yet the execution entirely convinces me that this was the right call. The imagery of him is exceptionally striking and memorable, selling him as the twisted, magical monster he was always meant to be. Where his previous fight was drowned in needless narration, he's now front and center during much of the fight, going toe-to-toe with Mogul for some time. Beyond that, there's just so much going on here that I barely have time to ask, where's this or that character? What exactly are they up to? Instead, I'm just along for the ride, going through the twists and turns of this jam-packed story. Just as the combatants are caught up in the chaos of this fight, so am I. In addition, I just really like the way they use Mogul and Naugus to condense some of the series' lore into something more comprehensible, because it's revealed that they both use the same sort of magic, the Ixis magics, and that it was Mogul who created the Ixis Order long ago. So now he and Naugus join forces, with Mogul as Naugus' true king, and seeing this man who refused to bow to Max so quickly bow to Mogul, it once again sells Mogul's strength, while giving Naugus a more unique and memorable role within the story moving forward. Once again, we're bringing order to the comic's chaos, crafting a world that feels wide and deep instead of random and vapid. But oh yeah, Mogul already had other subordinates, didn't he? These 6 E-list villains form a new villainous team, the Destructics.
So, Destructics, huh?
You heard that?
I think they heard you in Furville.
We can't be the fearsome foursome anymore. There's 6 of us.
Fair enough, just surprised you can count.
Yeah, this arc's dialogue has loads of personality too. For example, we get exposition about how Mogul was captured, yet even here there's character, because Tails and his Uncle Merlin aren't just winking at each other for fun. They're winking because only they remember the moment Mogul was truly captured, since Jack Daddy Tails rewrote the timeline. Sonic just thinks Merlin's talking about the other time they trapped Mogul in an emerald, while Tails knows the truth. It's cute and makes me go, you know what, yeah, these two are family. Heck, Merlin's reintroduction works so well because of Tails' tearful reaction. How he's so happy to have a part of his family back since he misses his mom and dad so much. Even if some of these characters may not matter to the readers all that much, Flynn doesn't forget what actually matters most. These characters mean something to each other, and they need to react accordingly. Stuff like this gives meaning to these plot beats by informing us about the characters at the same time. Like, how do we write off Knack the Weasel's old gang? Well, how about he says he's gonna visit the kitchen and make them a very special final meal? Holy crap. Let's also take the fact that in Mogul's first appearance, he had a sorcerer outfit for one of his many incarnations to make his creation of the Order of Ixis feel more natural and grounded in the comics world. To top it off, let's name drop the Albion Knights of Aurora from the Knuckles lore to help contextualize past mentions of the Forgotten Wars. Ixis Mogul is truly an ancient being after all. There's also Naugus saying he fused the Zone of Silence and the Void, which ends this confusing, series-long discrepancy between the two. Or how about Eggman discontinuing the Metal Snively project because he's disappointed in his robotic family, putting a punctuation point on a concept that only appeared in the background of one panel in the prior era. Yes, even details this small won't be forgotten or ignored. And then there's Sonic. Remember how he got his knighthood revoked? Well, he can get it back now if he wants, but my boy declines because he knows he's cool without the title. Meanwhile, when King Elias begins to doubt himself, Sonic encourages him to fight with honor, especially for those they've lost like Sir Connery. A sentiment that would already be sweet on its own, but hits incredibly hard due to the paneling and art. Just as Sir Connery wielded his sword to fight for those he followed and represented, Elias does too. but his faith is in his people, in those who believe in him. So much like Connery, he will brandish this sword. His stance, the panel layout, and background coloring are all very similar, cementing this comparison in my mind. In all of this, we are recontextualizing, recycling, reusing, and repurposing old material to show that this era isn't a reset. It's a repairment, a reparation, and the more you remember, the more satisfying it is. Really, for the first time in so long for this comic, I can truly buy into what it's telling me about its characters, and it feels so good to know all this time spent reading this comic wasn't a waste. However, there is one pretty obvious flaw in all of this that you might have thought of. A good deal of this story is driven by coincidence and contrivances, almost as though we're running through a checklist of conflicts to wrap up or consolidate. At a point, it all starts to feel pretty inorganic, and that's not to mention how little Sonic and his friends actually play a part in the narrative, even though they're here the entire time. The world of Archie Sonic may be the main character, but it's hard not to notice that this could be seen as taking that a little too far. Except that isn't actually a problem at all. In fact, the inorganic nature of events was part of the plan from the very start. Isn't that right, Adam? The ninja spiders who knew exactly when to attack, which led to the framing of M as the culprit and caused her death, which led to the return of Nagas, which led to the death of the ancient walkers, which released Mammoth Mogul, which led to the destruction of the crown and sword of Acorns, which led to Eggman's capture of Mogul and Nagas. All of these pieces were put in place by one grand and convoluted calculation. That's right. The final layer of the darkest storm is that everything about the events we've discussed so far was crafted by a literal evil supercomputer, acting as the mysterious narrator for the entire story. This three-parter was never meant to show Sonic off, it was an Adam special, solidifying him as a frightening antagonist who sees heroes and other villains alike as little more than raw data. I don't even know what to say here. It's genuinely genius. A whole arc that was designed to remove and reorganize as many pieces of the narrative as possible is literally being done so in-universe by a villain with a similar goal to the author himself. Adam, who was once just this virus whose standout character trait was enjoying wordplay, is now bending the world of Mobius to his will by taking his vast knowledge of the comics lore and making that lore kill itself. Like, what? How did Flynn come up with this? All of this ties into the last unresolved plot thread wrapped up in this arc, that being the mysterious Anonymous, this new rival to Dr. Eggman who was built up for multiple issues during the post-space era. Well, now we know it's been Eggman's son all along. The same son who we've already seen take his father's words of using anything necessary to ensure the Doctor's dominance a little too literally, and who's now been revealed to have gone completely off the deep end in his quest to become a worthy rival to Eggman. I am fulfilling my function. Once I am finished, Father will be so very proud of me. It would be one thing if some of this stuff was new, something Flynn came up with purely on his own to help his cleanup. But it isn't. It's all based on at least something from the prior writer's material, like Adam's love of games or him going behind Eggman's back. It's a mind-boggling combination of concepts that almost seems obvious in retrospect, even though it was clearly never planned. And as we reach the end of the story, it's finally revealed that this corrupt computer virus has given his name a new meaning. Adam determines Anonymous's movements. Oh boy. This is so silly, so awesome, so unique, so Archie Sonic. When I say that these 3 issues brought me joy, I hope you understand what I mean by that. Because I don't mean I was just a little happy or hopeful for the future of the comic. The fact that all this time I'd spent reading this other stuff wouldn't be a waste, it left me full-on relieved and gave me so much faith in the comic moving forward. And this new creative team managed to make me feel that in 5 issues. 5 issues! It only took them that long to transform this from a comic I hated, a comic I was ready to give up on, into one I couldn't pull myself away from, and one that I knew without a doubt I would finish. And somehow, it only gets better. Because now it's actually here. The true tale for this time. The arc begins with Eggman uncovering Adam's treachery. It took him a little bit, but he's finally pieced everything together and he is ticked. So he deletes every trace of his son from his system. Adam is no more. Except there's one thing Eggman didn't account for. One character he forgot. But can you really blame him? After all, who would willingly think about Tommy Turtle? Yep, that random B story from the post-space era where Tommy got some nanobots, or nanites as they're called, stuck on him is coming to a head. Adam has downloaded himself into Tommy, who has unknowingly helped spread the nanites to Nicole, Bunny, and Sonic's father. A callback to the final story of the pre-Flynn era. So Adam commands Bunny to incapacitate Tails and Nicole, and forces Jules to capture Tails and bring him to his base of operations, the Nanite City. At the same time, Adam forces Eggman to call Shadow to his side, who he swiftly defeats, placing him and Tails in this mysterious machine. Eggman may have forced Adam to reveal reveal himself earlier than expected, but no matter. With the power of the Chaos controlling ultimate life form and the chosen one of destiny at his disposal, Adam is able to enact his ultimate plan, one that will cement him as his father's equal.
A shortcut through time and space, a beacon for the gems. I will have all the Chaos Emeralds in the universe!
So he summons the green emeralds from across Mobius, the blue emeralds from planet Zorda, the red emeralds from Theraxia, the purple emeralds from the planet Eve destroyed, the yellow emeralds from the star Eve died in, and the gray emeralds from the Bem homeworld Argentium. Adam won't just bend the world of Mobius to his will, he'll bend the entire universe, and the whole comic along with it too. I mean, when Karheem of Weed of all things is relevant, then you know it's a big deal. Like, calm down, no one expected this deep of a cut, Flynn. I mean, Adam. But of course, Sonic won't have any of this, which leads to a super form battle, with Super Shadow and Turbo Tails helping out on the sidelines with their Chaos powers. That's right, it's time to actually do it to it. It's time to finally fulfill the series' longest running plot thread, the unification of the Chaos Emeralds, as Tails uses his abilities to send them into the Zone of Silence, away from Adam's clutches. Now this happens fast. Like one page Tails is being released from his pod and the next he's fulfilling his destiny. It could easily feel rushed or half-baked, and yet, it doesn't. Why? Well, first off, I didn't expect this at all. I was shocked that the comic returned to a plot point it had already wrapped up. Like, sure, what we got last time was a crappy ending for it, where Tails didn't even manage to merge the emeralds, instead just absorbing chaos energy in general or something. But I had no expectation that this era would go so far to rectify the mistakes of the past. But that surprise only lands on the first reading. Still, somehow, every subsequent time I go through the story, this still hits just as hard. And of course, that's because of the ever-important art and how shockingly memorable it all is. This story solidifies Yardley's ability to perfectly depict scale. Like, I will never forget how cool this shot of Tails looks as he fulfills the prophecy, bathed in light, these stark shadows silhouetting our heroes. I'll never forget the shot of Adam summoning the Chaos Emeralds, of Super Sonic blasting out of the panel, his golden aura bathing the page. The striking nature of it all is what makes this type of story feel dense rather than rushed. Because yes, I can rip through the panels and pages following the flow of the comic, or if I want, I can slow down. I can soak it all in. I can experience a comic that refuses to waste its space or my time, with execution that elevates its already great ideas into something truly spectacular. And I mean spectacular. Because finally we can talk about the real heart of this story, Tommy Turtle. Now, he too barely gets any actual time devoted to him. Instead, he spends most of the story's 28 pages being controlled by Adam. Before that, the only moment we get about him is here, a single page where some of the freedom fighters complain about his various screw-ups. Immediately, this works, because first off, this is likely how many readers felt about Tommy. He was a nuisance, annoying, a waste of space. And while the freedom fighters are nowhere near that harsh in their words, it's clear that they too are a bit fed up with his various problems. Which doesn't feel at all forced because in-universe he has caused problems for them before, getting himself captured on multiple occasions. The story simply leans into that side of Tommy a little more, which is a big reason why Tommy's final moments in this comic are so shocking.
The Egg Fleet is here. Let Tommy go. You're beat.
Hardly. In this super form, I'm invincible. Wait, what? Hey, Sonic.
Tommy? Is it really you this time?
I'm sorry it took so long to win back control. I'm sorry for everything, really. I'm sorry I've been such a pain. I'm sorry for all the trouble I've dragged you into. And I'm especially sorry for letting Adam do this to everyone.
Dude, it's cool. You're in control now.
No, I'm not. Adam will win back control any minute now, and I won't be able to get it back. Adam must be destroyed so that everyone will be cured of their nanite infections. I'm sorry, Sonic. You gave me a second chance in life. It's time I repaid that debt.
Tommy? No! Tommy?
So, why am I feeling things for Tommy Turtle? Like, why do I care about his death? How can I care about his death? This is a character I didn't want to see any more of. If you had told me this guy was going to get killed off, yeah, baby! I would have 100% believed I would celebrate his demise. Good riddance, buddy. But instead, we have this. An entire issue built to make this sense of loss and finality hit as hard as it possibly can in as little time as possible, too. All throughout this battle, the sky changing color, the sun setting as Tommy fades away, the orange glow, the explosion casting him and Sonic in dark shadows. Then Sonic stares numbly at his friend's ashes, unable to even get out a quip as Eggman walks away. And this sticks with Sonic, who goes to Tommy's grave an issue later, sitting there and considering how bad things have gotten for our heroes. But still, he leaves with confidence that they'll win in the end, that the friends he's lost won't have died in vain.
Catch you on the flip side, Tommy.
But you know what's maybe the best part? This death scene isn't some forced bid to make Tommy a heroic martyr. You know, changing the guy into something he's not for the sake of a tragic moment. No, what's insane is that this is in character for Tommy Turtle. After all, in his introductory issue, what did he do? Well, after putting Sonic, his friend, in danger, he sacrificed his life without a second thought to save him, dying in a fire. Of course, we later learn that he escaped. And yet, even now, when the stakes are higher than ever before, Tommy gives up his life without hesitation. And this time, it's final. Tommy Turtle isn't coming back. Tommy Turtle is dead. The pure desperation and pain on Sonic and Tommy's faces during their final conversation, Tommy's conflicted expression, those sad eyes and a hopeful smile. I believe his emotions. I feel for him. And by the end, I believe in this world. I believe that Tommy Turtle wasn't just a cog in the machine of a story. He was a person who Sonic cared about, who he knew since he was a child. He was the guy who taught Sonic the meaning of friendship. And for the first time since his introduction, that actually feels like more than a ridiculous joke. Tommy
was maybe the bravest freedom fighter of us all, and he took Adam with him.
But of course, it wouldn't be Archie Sonic without a few asterisks. Now would it? I'd like to avoid talking about it, but we've got to pull the train back to Reality Station at some point, so for as good as this early stuff is, there are some downsides I just can't ignore. For starters, there's this B story about the Chaotix arresting Renfield T. Rodent from the drug-laced Chili Dog arc and putting him away for good. This tale is bland. And it's an example of how some characters don't get the bombastic and cathartic send-off I'd expect from this era. The same goes for Robotnik's daughter M, who never gets to do anything all that cool before she's taken out. Then there's the bizarre art in this Blaze introduction. Yep, I didn't like that. This 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters B story and Groundhog Day parody from Mike Gallagher. Sorry, old friend. I did not laugh at your antics on this day. But then there's something a bit bigger, the 2-issue finale to Mobius 25 years later. Yeah, remember how that story ended on some weird reality-warping cliffhanger? Well, now we get a resolution, as Sonic finds himself in an alternate universe where Shadow is an evil king. So he must work together with those who remember the previous timeline to free Mobius, even if they'll never be able to return to how things were. And it's pretty okay. Nice character moments and interactions like Sonic realizing he should have appreciated what he had and making up with Tails, or Knuckles fulfilling his promise to be a better dad. Check. Awesome visuals like Maria being treated as a goddess that looms over the planet? You bet. Lara's Sue getting to be pretty cool and come into her own as a fighter? There it is. Sonic and Sally's children being wiped from existence and Sonic mourning them, so now Sally and him have to bang right here? Right now? Hell yeah! A shame it's all just a little too fast and doesn't get enough time to really breathe. To a certain extent, it feels like the main reason this is here is so that the future timeline can be detached from the main story through a shift in the future and what happened there, leaving the present plotline open to change. Regardless, instead of a constant grin on my face while reading, I was left simply enjoying myself a decent bit. And in the end, I left this arc feeling like it was adequate. What a shame? Huh. Wait, is that all? Those are all my problems with the comic? Like, every single one. I literally have no more major complaints for the rest of this era. Yeah, screw Reality Station, folks, because reality is good and I'm feeling juiced. Truly, any complaints I have about any of the material in this era are so minor, so inconsequential, that they're barely even worth mentioning. These are nitpicks, rare one-off moments that don't quite land for me, or shockingly uncommon instances of iffy art. This is one of the most consistently enjoyable stories I've ever read, where almost every single piece of it is memorable and fun and awesome and— oh my gosh, is that Sleuth Doggy Dog? This man! He's still here! Continuing to pop up in story after story, strutting around with this confidence that just screams, I own this place, baby! Sleuth is here, dunking on other goons when they step out of line, threatening Tails with a gun to the head and getting away with it too! Sleuth is a guy who sticks to the classic ways of crime, meaning that rather than lofty goals and crazy motivations, good old Doggy Dog just wants enough money to eat all the T-bone steaks he could ask for. Which is what makes all his reappearances so funny, that this embodiment of the goofiness of the early comic, this relic of the reference-heavy gag era named after Snoop Dogg for some reason, who just wants food and power, is still at it like 200 issues later. It just gets me that he keeps showing up. And even better, my man actually gets what he wants, cashing out with his steaks and leaving all this crap behind him. And since he's been around for so long, it's funny, but also weirdly satisfying that even Sleuth Doggy Dog of all characters gets an ending. Goodbye, old friend. Remember Feist, Naugus's weird panda badger goon who we saw in the Zone of Silence? No? Don't blame ya, it's been a while. Anyway, we never saw this guy again after Naugus escaped, which seemed like a waste after taking the time to introduce him. Oh well. By the way, on a totally unrelated note, remember Tails sending all those Chaos Emeralds into the Zone of Silence using this portal? Well, now the Freedom Fighters need to go in and grab one of them so they can use its power. Pretty handy, huh? Our heroes have billions upon billions of Chaos Emeralds at their fingertips.
Mortals, you shall be judged by Feist.
That's right. All of that chaos power turned this forgotten character with 8 panels of page time and 4 lines of dialogue into the Lord of the Chaos Emeralds. Now, anytime our heroes want one of these magical gems, they have to complete one of this game-loving demigod's challenges. And yes, they're all based around the special stages from the games. Oh, and Feist also combined all the emeralds together, one for each color now, meaning that yes, there are now the 7 Chaos Emeralds you'd expect. They seriously use this random character to bring the comic's lore more in line with the games while also giving Tails' prophecy long-lasting effects? And it works? Feist himself is also just a ton of fun. It's hilarious and surreal watching these characters we spent so much time with work around this one-off background character. Whenever they're around him, there's this tension in the air, knowing that if Feist isn't pleased, it's game over. Funny enough though, he actually kinda likes our boys because Sonic beat up Naugus and Tails sent the emeralds here in the first place. So yeah, first emeralds on the house.
Know this, I shall not grant another Chaos Emerald so easily. Next time you will be challenged as I see fit.
Right, got it. Move it, Tails.
Thanks again.
You're back already? Who are you talking to?
Close the portal! Close the portal!
Yeah, Sonic, I get it. What the hell is happening? Why is this panda badger a god now? Why is it so cool? Remember Sergeant Simeon? No? Well, I mean, why would you? He was just a background mook who Mogul kept using, and for a long time that's how Flynn treats him too. However, since this era has such consistently snappy pacing, his presence is still worthwhile. He just acts as an extension of more interesting characters, fleshing out the world, rather than receiving undue prolonged focus himself. So if he'd remained that way, I wouldn't have really batted an eye. Except by the comic's end, it finds time to make sure even he's worth remembering. See, Sergeant Simeon, or Simon as he was once known, was booted out of his peace-loving monkey village after bringing home weapons they disapproved of. He wanted to protect his people and his grandpa, and yet he was shunned as a violent ape. They didn't want to fight. So he went to wage a one-man war against Robotnik's forces. Through these silent panels, we get a montage of his action-packed adventures as he went down against some SWAT bots, guns blazing without regrets. That is, of course, until Mammoth Mogul saved him and enlisted his services, indulging his newfound desire for strength and power. Eventually, though, Simeon returns to his village. His people are excited to see him now. They missed him. And more than that, they've realized he was right. They were foolish to cling to their peace. I mean, we saw as much in a gag story in issue 45 where the Freedom Fighters ran into some trouble in the jungle. And now we've tied that back into Simeon somehow and... Wow, sorry, anyway. Now these guys are fighters and they want their dear Simon to lead them. You know, I have earned this for all I've done, but you all haven't earned me. Wow, why is that line so raw? Why does it go so hard? By all rights, he should just be some random mook. But now when I reread prior sections he appears in, this inoffensive background character has a history, a place in this world that led him to this moment. And more than that, I care about his backstory. I like him, he's cool. The other members of the Destructics get similarly engaging backstories. Predator Hawk was a hardworking soldier in the Battlebird Armada, doing all he could to climb the ranks and better himself. But then his rightful place was given to the leader's son. So now he lives for himself to challenge himself. Then there's Lightning Lynx, a scorned lover boy from a ninja clan, and he wants revenge. Oh, and Flying Frog, a character I genuinely forgot about, but now we're learning he has done things. I think Flying Frog is a serial killer. I think he went mad as a court jester? Is that why he's always rhyming, trying to find humor in a world that forced him to make it laugh? Actually, why am I thinking so hard about this? And why do I want to see more of these random characters? Remember Drago Wolf? Boy, do I hate this dude. This stupid dickhead got so much random focus during the endgame arc as the traitor among the Freedom Fighters, despite doing nothing to earn his sudden status as the pseudo-protagonist of that storyline. And I get the feeling that maybe Flynn hated him as much as me because now, in basically every one of his scenes, he's getting dunked on. I mean, this idiot's lost how many games of rock, paper, scissors? Even in the stories where his team is winning, he's still losing, whether it's a main focus or, more likely, in the background of a panel where he belongs. Yeah, get wrecked,
Drago!
He's a moron, and now the comic is aware of that and using my own hatred of him to make each of these moments of failure so cathartic and entertaining. Yes, I love to hate Drago. I love this I'll never forget Mammoth Mogul. After all, he wouldn't let me. He inserted himself where he didn't belong over and over. While I've gone over his major improvements in the Darkest Storm, the result of that story was still the same as every other encounter with him. Mogul lost, his godlike abilities were drained, and now he's on the hunt for a new source of ultimate power so that he can finally conquer the universe, and blah blah blah. Only now, the comic treats this goal like the joke it's become, to the point that even the editors are in on it. Mogul consistently attempts to take over whatever storyline is going on, only to get immediately smacked down for it. All our heroes and villains know his tricks now, and are quite frankly bored by the theatrics. Arc after arc passes by with Mogul getting a few cameos to throw out some entertaining insults, and that's it. So he remains trapped in a cell that resists his powers, and robbed of his Chaos Emerald energy source. Because of this, Mogul's had a lot of time to think, and presents Sonic with a carefully calculated ultimatum. Hey, how about you let me go? Of course, Sonic laughs this off, but for some reason, Mogul is confident in his demands. After all, if he isn't free, he'll unleash a new fearsome foursome to do his bidding. So night falls, our heroes rest, and it's only then that Mogul reveals his latest plan. Because he's been waiting for this moment. The moment he could sense that 3 of his old minions were in town. Those who he marked long ago. Those who had forgotten or were made to forget. Remember. Remember that they were vulnerable, scared, alone. Remember that Mogul was there for them in their darkest times. Remember that they owe him a great debt, and it's time that they repay his generosity. However, Mogul won't allow this to end in yet another basic brawl. No, instead he sends his minions away, to fly high into the sky, to run across the ocean, and to walk straight into Eggman City. And unless Sonic gives Mogul their Chaos Emerald, he will have Tails fall to his death, command Mina to drown, and allow Mighty to be gunned down in the street. You're fast enough to catch them though, right? Right?
Any one of them, yeah, but they are too far apart. Or do you use your speed to rally the freedom fighters? Do you have time to explain everything? Do you have time to find which part of the sky, which expanse of beach, or which road to New Megaopolis that you need to rescue them? I want your word that everyone returns home unharmed or no deal. You have it. Welcome to the fearsome foursome.
Sonic's cockiness turning to this utter shock and confusion, Mogul's pettiness, Mina's boyfriend's panic, the 2 pages of complete silence as every panel of our desperate heroes contrasts what could be the final moments for their friends. Stop, please, you can't!
No time to take it slow, Nicole. It's life or death.
Are you insane? I can't control that kind of power.
Nicole, he didn't leave me much of a choice.
Would you like it better if Mina drowned? What?
Whoa, Ash, chill. Such inane squabbling.
This whole sequence is excellent. For the first time in the entire comic, Mogul actually looks and feels scary and insidious. After so many larger-than-life plots, watching Mogul resort to a plan that's so small-scale feels more terrifying than any of his godly battles. How he uses Sonic's friends to force his hand. It paints the picture that Mogul's fatal flaw was always his arrogance, his presumption that he could win through brute force. But Mogul was also someone who could be sneaky, plotting in the shadows. Always there, watching, waiting. And now, having been humbled by so many defeats, curse or no curse, he's learned his lesson. And the conclusion this leads him to is incredibly compelling. Now, we all obviously knew that Sonic, Mighty, and Tails weren't gonna die. Their plot armor is Sega thick, leaving the only one who could potentially go as Mina, but honestly, I highly doubted that was gonna happen. And Mogul knows this, explaining that after attaining godlike power multiple times, he has always fallen and failed because of our heroes. Even after playing part in murdering the gods themselves and removing the curse upon him, fate conspires to humiliate Mogul in favor of the Blue Blur and his friends. Or as he puts it, even if I were to act now, I am certain something would thwart me or rescue you. It is a cosmic punchline I've grown quite weary of. And so, content with his victory, Mogul leaves our heroes be, and he won't push his luck. After all, he's immortal. Sonic and all his friends will die one day, and once that happens, he'll take this world. In the meantime, however, he promises to make Sonic, his friends, his children, and all his grandchildren's lives a living hell for all that remains, sending assassins to ruin their peaceful days, funding the means for civil unrest in their home, and most importantly to Mogul, getting a good laugh from a round of public humiliation.
This way, Mogul is finally able to live up to his name, becoming one of the wealthiest businessmen in all of Mobius, bringing jobs and entertainment to criminals and civilians alike in these dark times, all while being the kingpin of an underground empire. I love this! I mean, taking Mogul's status as a sort of petty god and combining it with the meta of the writers as a power even above gods like him is so smart. In a way, acknowledging this limitation makes Mogul feel even more threatening, because now this isn't just a thought in the back of my mind, something where I need to suspend my disbelief that Mogul would do this. Instead, now Mogul didn't kill Tails, Mighty, or Mina because he simply didn't want to find out if fate would let him succeed against a Sonic determined to avenge them. As such, Mogul has basically defied the comic itself, refusing to let his unattainable godhood gimmick weigh him down any further. Instead, he's content to exist in the background. But of course, if there's one thing this retrospective has taught me, it's that no matter what, Mammoth Mogul refuses to be forgotten.
I'll pay handsomely for the shoes of Sonic the Hedgehog. It is up to you if his feet are still in them.
So far, a lot of my focus has been devoted to side characters. If you couldn't tell, this comic is dense, and you can probably count on your fingers how many characters Flynn fails to bring back or redefine. I've genuinely just scratched the surface of this story and its world, but we'd be here all day if I kept going with these randos. Regardless, all this is to say that what Flynn has done here with these largely forgotten characters is truly impressive, building off the looseness of their past to redefine them in a way that almost feels effortless. But what about a more prominent character whose past we can't simply sweep under the rug? What about someone like Antoine? After all, one minute he's a coward with a heart of gold, the next a hardened warrior. Then a guy who just hangs around but doesn't actually do anything, really. Then a coward again with zero faith in his abilities, only to revert back to a jaded swordsman, but oops, that was actually his evil doppelganger. And now Antoine is, yeah, I don't know anymore. While I've certainly been a fan of Antoine, he's a character who, at a point, I just had to roll with, accepting that his personality would be at the whim of whoever's writing him at the time and just hope that they chose to handle him in a way that fits with my preferred interpretation. But as we've seen, Flynn wants us to get properly invested in these characters and to acknowledge their entire past. And in a single story, in just 8 pages, Flynn manages to do just that for Antoine. We begin with Antoine alone in the home his evil counterpart wrecked, contemplating all that the fiend took from him. He stares at an old picture of himself and the freedom fighters from before Bunny even arrived, a picture he's been torn out of. There's a real sense of longing and loss here, that Antoine is wondering if, because of evil Antoine, he somehow lost his place among his friends. But then Bunny appears, assuring him that he isn't alone. Of course, there's an underlying awkwardness and tension to some of this conversation. Bunny didn't realize Antoine had been replaced after all, so it's not like it's going to be easy for them to just pick up where they left off before he was taken. However, this conversation quickly takes a turn for the worse. See, Antoine's dad is still sick from the poison that evil Antoine gave him, and Sonic rushes in to give Antoine the news, telling him that he needs to get to the hospital fast. It's there that Antoine learns the harsh truth. His father isn't going to make it. Too much damage has already been done. So Antoine speaks with him one last time as he lays in his hospital bed. And Antoine takes this opportunity to tell his father just how ashamed he is. Ashamed of being a coward, ashamed of letting his jealousy divide the team, ashamed of failing his father's good name. And in the end, he just hopes and pleads for his father's forgiveness. But his father thinks that this must be a joke. His boy isn't a failure. His boy isn't a coward. He fought for his friends, for his kingdom, and for the woman he loves. Of course, the basic emotional weight of a father encouraging his son before he dies is here. But to me, that's not what gives these words meaning. No, what gives them real weight is that they're true. That includes Antoine's words about himself, about his many faults. But at the same time, that also includes what his father sees in him as well. After all, no matter his attitude, no matter his jealousies, Antoine did fight for his friends, for his kingdom, and he never gave up, even as his demeanor and courage fluctuated from story to story. His father sees that, letting both his son and the audience know that this is also true to his character, but above all else, there's a bravery there, and that this is who he wants his son to see himself as. However, it's not only Antoine who's redefined here. It's Bunny. Because though she doesn't need it as badly as Antoine, she was mishandled during the post-space era, drowning in the crappy romance plotlines. So Antoine's father turns to her and reminds her how brave she is, harkening back to some of her most interesting, emotional stories from the past. After all, she has fought Robotnik for her soul. We've seen that. We know that about her. And we know from that story so long ago where Antoine went to get a power ring for Tails, that Bunny isn't just the person who picks Antoine up because his dad says she is. She's been there for him, had his back. I've seen it. I've read it. So with his final breaths, his father encourages them to pursue this relationship, to hold on to their love for one another because it makes them happy, regardless of any confusion. And in the end, Antoine's father leaves him not with words telling him that he should be better, that he needs to do better, but instead with a simple acknowledgement of how proud of his son he truly is. If you remember, back in the way past insanest era, there was a story where Sonic attempted to help Antoine by tricking Antoine's father into thinking he was a brave warrior. While I enjoyed that story and there was certainly heart there, the ending and message left something to be desired, as Antoine's dad didn't get a moment to acknowledge his son's bravery, and even if he had, it probably wouldn't have been satisfying because it wouldn't have been real. After all, this was a facade to hide Antoine's weaknesses, and he didn't even realize until after he'd done it that he'd managed to be brave. And yet here, Antoine's father says the words Antoine wanted to hear that day. Not in ignorance of Antoine's flaws, but in an understanding that he's seen his son's growth and bravery and he has pride in the man his son can be, and the man he has been. From the brief time we spent with him, Antoine's dad was already a surprisingly likable guy. But this story here, it makes him stand out as truly memorable. Overall, this story is striking. The emotions and words all feel so grounded, honest, and real, especially with its final panel, bathed in white, Bunny and Antoine's silhouettes in stark contrast to his father in the hospital bed, who seems to be fading away, with only 3 simple words standing out. I love you. From here, Antoine's entire character is informed by his father's death, as he follows his words, acting more comfortably as himself, still sometimes afraid, but never giving in to that fear. Still with his goofy accent and misunderstandings, but also as an honest voice of reason, and a confident and brave soldier who charges into battle with his friends instead of lingering behind them. Where previously this kind of change for Antoine was sudden or forced, expecting me to care because I was simply told to, now it's a story, a moment for growth that I got to experience with Antoine. And where before the comic's way of making Antoine capable was having him act as a cold, angry loner, now he finds strength in the people he loves. Meanwhile, Bunny exudes so much more confidence going forward. There's a spunkiness to her that she never really had before, like when she uses a misunderstanding regarding her robotic limbs to infiltrate Eggman's forces and starts hamming it up, or her many fun expressions. Bunny is no longer the mopey gal she'd morphed into post-space, lost without her man. No, now she's the one Princess carrying her man, or comforting him when he's scared of heights in a tall tree. Heck yeah! And of course, she's still the type of person who will fight with everything she's got, even if it could come at a great personal cost. All of this while still being one of the coolest looking characters in the comic, and never losing her warmth or charm. So finally, this couple I'd fallen in love with in issue 23 is back and stronger than ever. And man, I'm so happy that my investment in them finally means something. After all, Antoine actually proposes to Bunny, and the issue after that they get married, surrounded by their loved ones. Over and over, the comic continues to give them sweet moments together, their goofy accents and contrasting designs punctuating a pure and simple love. Plus, with how nervous Antoine is before the wedding, you can just tell how much he loves her. But don't worry, my boy Charmy is here to give some sage marriage advice as the resident married man. We even get to see Ant and Bunny go on their honeymoon, having a good old time, planning a good old time, and even having a frank discussion as to if they maybe rushed into things, or at least wondering if the other feels that way. But of course, neither of them regret where they are, as they reaffirm that after all the pain and loss they've only overcome together, what better path forward could there be for them than to continue that bond for the rest of their lives? Plus, as a fellow married man who's got a cool wife, I gotta say, I just connect with them, you know? All their little moments together, the details that show how much they care for each other. They feel real to me and familiar. In the end, what makes Bunny and Antoine such a wonderful couple is that they're just good to each other. A consistent bright spot and steadfast relationship that contrasts a world that has taken so much from them and from others. And I genuinely love to see it. Now, speaking of characters who have really had it rougher than the rest of them, I love what Flynn gives my boy Knuckles. See, despite telling his father he was needed to protect Knothole and defeat Eggman back in Return to Angel Island, Rad Red and the Chaotix effectively vanish for the next 20 issues, aka the rest of the post-space era, outside of 5 cameos. Like, where are they? So Flynn immediately rectifies this, leaning into the group's intended purpose as extra muscle through the Darkest Storm arc. And from there, the Chaotix continue to be invaluable assets, whether that be through the role of bodyguards, SPO single-handedly destroying one of Eggman's bases with the help of Nicole, or Julie Sue training Amy. You really start to feel like these two disparate friend groups actually know each other and are on proper terms. While it's an incredibly small moment, I always think of this expression from Vector when he has to restrain an Adam-possessed bunny. My man just looks so sad and sorry, and that makes me feel like, yeah, these characters are friends. Of course, Knuckles gets his fair share of action too, like being the last line of defense against a puppeted Sonic, protecting those Chow as mentioned earlier, or fending off the Babylon rogues when they try to destroy Knothole. But honestly, all that pales in comparison to the true value Knuckles brings to the fight against Robotnik, and that's stability. For example, when Shadow eventually comes to the Freedom Fighters asking for help, Knuckles acts as the protector, allowing Shadow enough time to finally learn his backstory and his purpose. As Knuckles says, "I know what it's like to be lost without a past. I won't let you take this moment from Shadow." Then there's a story where, thanks to Knuckles' chaos abilities and the Guiding Star Gem, Merlin is able to find the Prowers. That's right, after all this time, Tails is reunited with his lost family. Finally, it's Knuckles who comes to check up on Sonic at Tommy's grave. On its own, this moment already feels worlds apart from the Sonic and Knuckles dynamic of old. These two are clearly no longer rivals, they're just friends, brothers even. To the point that despite their dialogue reading as typical Sonic and Knuckles banter, as Rad Red teases the blue blur about not giving up, their body language communicates so much more, a jovialness in Knuckles and a calmness in Sonic we haven't really seen between them. Sonic's closed eyes, his slack arm, the slight tilt of his head, it makes his boast come off as self-aware and even grateful rather than putting on a confident face. Ending as Knuckles reassures his pal, saying, "We won't let their sacrifice be in vain, Sonic. We'll beat Dr. Eggman. We'll win this." Through these scenes, we really see that Knuckles isn't just protecting Knothole, he's rebuilding it, reuniting families, allowing for clarity, and encouraging those around him. And all of this without drawing attention to himself, without even a thank you, but always with a confident smile on his face. Also, maybe as a big boy Archie knucklehead, I'm making these moments seem bigger than they are, but honestly, it's only because they're so seemingly insignificant that they feel so strong to me. Knuckles has truly become a proper guardian, doing things his own way, but still being this strong force for good. And it's great to see. Unfortunately though, crunch time can't last forever, so there's another character we need to discuss. A character who really needs the Flynn treatment. So let's see what he has in store for Sally Acorn. In issue 156, Sally allowed her supposed husband to arrest Sonic, as he pled for her to support him and remember all they had been through together. It was a cold, distant moment for her, and their last interaction before Flynn came onto the book. How did the comic address this back then? Well, it didn't. Of course not. They continued to pine for each other like nothing happened. This, when combined with the series' long mishandling of her character, meant that I was pretty much done with Sally. And it seems Flynn understood this would be the case for many readers, because in the midst of issue after issue of cleanup and restructuring, Sally is off to the side, often not appearing for many issues at a time. However, in the moments that she is around, there's a clear intention to make her feel a bit different now. For example, in Birthday Bash, Sally celebrates Sonic's special day, and is actually responsible for the idea of rebuilding the clubhouse in the first place. It's a return to simpler times that she helps bring to fruition, and I really enjoyed that. A while later, we catch up with Sally again. Her father is still in a coma from Evil Antoine's poisoning, so Sonic and Tails go and get a Chaos Emerald to power a machine built to revive Max, allowing him to regain consciousness. However, as soon as they're finished, Sally hands back the emerald to a confused Sonic and Tails, a coy look on her face, as she promised Merlin that they could have it. Tails helped her get her family back with the emerald, so now she's going to return the favor. These moments are super quick, no more than a panel or two each, but they show a clear desire for Sally to be more involved in her friends' lives, harshly contrasted by how much she hasn't been during this era and well before it. After all, when Bunny and Antoine appear with the news that they're getting married, Sally's only response is to let them know that they've got work to do. A new mission has come up. With this, it seems Sonic's feelings towards Sally have finally aligned with mine. He's pretty fed up with her and laments to Antoine that, like usual, Sally seems to have no consideration for her friends or their feelings. But Antoine actually shows empathy for Sally, laying out all the things she's been going through, like how she was in charge of the last bastion of freedom against Robotnik, or her father's declining health, or her trauma from Sonic's death. All of these could feel like excuses, and to Sonic they are, as he correctly states, yeah, well, we've all had it rough lately. To which Antoine agrees, but adds, which is why I'm so happy we have each other to rely on. And just like that, the comic has given me the key to finally begin enjoying Sally, because we aren't going to brush aside Sally's actions and tell me to get over it. Instead, it humbly asks both Sonic and the reader to just be kind, to show some grace to a character who really needs it, expressed through another character who just received the same grace for his worst moments, and through it was given a chance to become something better. Because for all my frustrations with her, Sally isn't a monster. She's not some conniving manipulator. Nothing she's done has been out of malice or hatred. She's a broken and scared teenager who simply has no idea what to do. Me being on this mission, making the team like this, it was selfish of me. Don't think I haven't noticed, Bunny. I haven't really been a part of the Freedom Fighters for a long time. You and Antoine getting married, and Sonic and I being so distant now. I'm being jealous. What works so well about this little interaction is that, though Sally is still sad and suffering, it has a different feel. It's like in that time she's been in the background isolating herself, she's come to a proper conclusion about herself and her behavior, and though she's lonely, she wants to try and change that. I mean, what is this conversation but that? A moment of reaching out to a friend for help, crying in front of her rather than crying alone in her room. From here, Sally continues to be proactive, illuminated by the night sky that before she could only cry beneath in the post-space era. Now she's grinning ear to ear, actually allowing herself to have a good time, because this is Sally Acorn too, the hyper-competent leader of the Freedom Fighters. Finally, her position among her friends is confirmed for her, as Antoine and Bunny ask Sonic and Sally to be the best man and maid of honor at their wedding. Sally may have felt alone, but her friends never forgot her. And in response, she gives Bunny and Antoine the heartfelt congratulations they deserve. Really, this whole issue just has this overwhelming feeling of reflection and camaraderie. While the stakes are life or death, our heroes are casual and confident, enjoying each other's company, bathed in the warm night glow that permeates every page. On top of that, it seems Antoine's talk with Sonic had an effect on him too, even if he was never really done with Sally. After all, as soon as he hears the action start, his first concern is if she'll be okay. Either way, this one interaction between them sums up the state of their relationship perfectly. Hey, it's the Marvelous Queen. I'm still just a princess, but thanks. I let you have that one. I know. Of course, even if others are extending Sally some grace, that doesn't mean she's going to be able to do so for herself. Because as the story ends with Sonic carrying Sally away just like old times, she has this uncertain look on her face. Like she's having a good time, but that she feels a bit guilty about that too. It's a moment that feels human, and no matter how small it could seem, it truly won me over on Sally Acorn. Because finally, Sally's suffering isn't just here for cruel conflict or spectacle. Now it's the premise for a story of a young woman determined to reclaim everything she held dear. And the comic is going to show us every step. We see Sally help Bunny get ready for a wedding, enjoying the company of a friend she's kept at arm's length for so long. We see Sally tease Sonic and him happily play along, while still capturing the tension and discomfort that underlies those interactions. I get this feeling that Sally is testing the waters to see if it's even okay for her to get back into Sonic's life. It's a conflict that permeates this scene, where Sonic and Sally are alone and reflecting on all they've been through, how much they've changed over time. Sally asks Sonic to join her so she wouldn't be alone, but while one moment she accepts his help, the next she makes a point to get down herself. Though she laments how much things have changed, she now clearly understands that she could have handled that change so much better. Physically, we see how she can take care of herself, but emotionally, there's still that uncertainty. In the end, though, she finally acknowledges her outburst at Sonic's homecoming party, but Sonic makes it clear he doesn't need an apology. She's his friend, and he's ready for both of them to move forward. Again, I just love the vulnerability here. It makes it clear that Sally hasn't waited this long to apologize out of pride or vanity. It's something that Sonic had seemingly moved on from her past with such ease, and she doesn't know how to handle that. How to handle that he's been acting so normal around her. Which of course shows how much Sonic has matured, even teasing Sally that while she broke his heart, he got over it. It just feels real in a way I truly didn't expect. This understanding of each other that goes beyond words, sold perfectly by these gestures and expressions. Their closed-off body language slowly opening up as the scene progresses. Through all of this, it's clear that our heroes are ready to move forward, to finally leave the baggage of their past behind and rebuild what's left. After all, the Freedom Fighters can never reclaim what they've lost. Mobotropolis is gone, and what was once their hideaway has become their new home. If there's one thing the Flynn era has made clear so far, it's that the connections they have are temporary, that they can be lost at a moment's notice in this cruel and crazy world. In that sense, it's important for Sonic and his friends, now more than ever, to hold on to what they love and all they have left. As far as Dr. Robotnik is concerned, there's always been one question in the back of my mind. Hey, why doesn't he just, nuke the freedom fighters? And I do mean nuke, as we know this guy packs that kind of heat. But no, apparently the Doctor needs to know the exact coordinates to a location with no cover and some really big forest in order to win. Early on, this made sense, because Knothole was presented to us as a hole in the ground hidden from view. Then the writers decided it was an actual village, and then there were the occasions when Robotnik just knew where it was, but forgot the next issue. Of course, though, this was the gag era, a time when Robotnik would sometimes literally read the script of the story, so you weren't supposed to take it all that seriously, and I had no trouble suspending my disbelief. However, as the comic became more serious, and even after Robotnik does learn the location of our heroes, he still struggles to take them out, or in the case of the post-space era, just flat out doesn't bother for nearly its entire run. Even though he can conquer Angel Island just like that with an entire armada at his disposal, Eggman vents that the real reason he can't beat Sonic, the thing that makes him so unpredictable, is hormones.
We're talking about teenagers. They're not exactly known for the rationality and logic.
Thanks, Ken. Fortunately, though, the Doctor's charisma and terrifically terrifying depictions carried him hard, and so I was content to just roll with the Eggman, to accept that part of his charm was the dichotomy of his killer instinct and his casually comedic cruelty. And besides, if Robotnik did win as he so easily should, then that would be it. The story would be over. The game would end. And so it does.
It's about time you showed up, rodent.
After over 200 issues, Dr. Robotnik has finally done it. He's burned Knothole to the ground and captured its citizens in a matter of pages. That threat of his and the display of power back in the Darkest Storm arc was no bluff. Our heroes never stood a chance, and now it's revealed that Robotnik knew this all along. To him, it was all just a game. And honestly, that makes perfect sense. After all, this is Robo-Robotnik we're dealing with. A man who had already conquered his world and killed his Sonic. And what did he do when he was first introduced? He toyed with our heroes. He tested them from afar. All before revealing that he traveled through time and space to find another Sonic so he could fill the void left in his metallic heart for war and destruction. So Flynn fully leans into that for Robotnik's character. Now every failure, every loss, and every angry rant is recontextualized. All of it was simply the Doctor's annoyance at the fact that if he was going to take over the world, then he didn't want it to be so easy, so boring. He wanted a true victory, a dastardly trap, a battle for the ages, or at the very least, for it to just be fun. Because Robotnik has that goofier side and enjoys messing around, allowing his psychotic whims and endless mood swings to guide his actions. But eventually, he got tired. He got fed up with waiting for something interesting to happen. And so he decided to get serious. He decided to win. The presentation of Robotnik's victory here is excellent. His looming presence over Bunny and Antoine's ceremony, Espio getting seemingly disintegrated by this beam, everyone panicking and crying and stunned as their friends vanish. And finally, this one shot of Sonic as he thinks his family and friends are dead. His gritted teeth contrasting a crooked scowl and a broken stance. There's fear and anger and so much more expressed in this one pose. Robotnik may have never gotten this serious before, but there's the sense that Sonic never has either. But then something interesting happens. Eggman tells Sonic that his friends are alive. After all, he didn't come here to face an already broken hero. It's his job to break the hero. Meet the Egg Beater, a robot specifically designed to combat Sonic's speed and power, armed with the classic wrecking ball, decked out in spikes with a bumper for a shield, and all of it tied together by this Death Egg robot-esque design. Each piece is a callback to something dangerous or indestructible from the games, and the implication is clear. This robot is invincible. It's so cool watching Eggman guide Sonic across the battlefield, following up his blocks or baiting him into an attack, all while a ceaseless rant consumes the page. You genuinely feel Sonic being beaten both mentally and physically as Robotnik mocks the dead, berates him for his failures, and even roasts Sonic for his love life. For one, I love how petty this is and how underlying all of it is a truth. Sonic has failed, and all of that culminates in a single question from the Doctor. So how come you're all alone? And the fact that this truly gets to Sonic feels earned. After all, we've seen Sonic go from a hero who stands tall at a funeral for a fellow warrior to one who needs to be picked up after he loses a friend. This is a Sonic who's vulnerable, who can be overwhelmed, and that leads to this moment where Sonic genuinely snaps, putting everything he has into an attack so powerful it pushes back the ocean. If Robotnik were to block this like it was no big deal, I gotta say, I probably wouldn't buy it. Which is why it's so clever that even the Doctor is unsure. Maybe he made a mistake, a miscalculation. Wouldn't be the first time the rodent surprised him. The impact blows back the clouds. Sonic lets out a victorious laugh, only for it to be revealed that even the Doctor had underestimated his genius. Sonic the Hedgehog has reached his limit. I'm not playing with you, rodent. Run. Run all over the world and try to start a new freedom fighter group. You will find no one. So run for the rest of your life and never escape the humiliation of today. Reading all of this for the first time genuinely left me shocked. It just happened so fast, so suddenly, with a viciousness and brutality I didn't expect. Such a commitment to humiliating our protagonist that what should have been his biggest moment of strength is actually just a way to expose his limitations. And what this leads to is so compelling. Because as we saw, Sonic got a bit rattled during the fight. So, what made him finally snap? Was it losing his family and friends? Was it his home being destroyed? Was it that he wanted so badly to save them? Well, no. At least that wasn't the last straw. It was that Eggman dared to claim Sonic the Hedgehog had reached his limit. Out of all the many characters Flynn has recontextualized and that I've discussed, you might have noticed that someone's been missing. Sonic the Hedgehog, the main character of this comic. So why haven't I properly focused on him yet? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Even before Flynn came onto the book, Sonic has been pretty good. Really, for all the comic's flaws, Sonic has been consistently entertaining, intentionally or otherwise. Each writer's interpretation of his way past cool demeanor is stuffed with a surprising amount of charm or such high levels of brazen stupidity that he never failed to make me smile. Along with that, there were his occasional endearing, heartfelt moments. The real problem was everything surrounding Sonic. All too often, he was ignored in favor of lackluster plots or thrown into obnoxious situations that just didn't get much out of him. Beyond that, when something interesting did happen, he would rarely get a proper reaction or would swiftly forget. So Flynn's job here was relatively easy. Just give Sonic something to react to. And all the plots I've discussed so far do just that. In Birthday Bash, we see Flynn's take on his fun-loving, badnik-breaking side. In The Darkest Storm, we see him lift up and encourage others. In The Tale for This Time, we see his stark, emotional reaction to Tommy's death, and following that, a moment where he needs to be encouraged by his friends. And of course, there's his various emotions surrounding Sally and the ways he chooses to interact with her on a moment-to-moment level. What should be clear above all else is that Sonic has loads of nuance. He runs a wide spectrum of emotions as he's thrown into wild scenario after wild scenario, and in the end, that gives him a level of humanity I adore. And that's why I love his defeat here so much. We've never seen something like this from Sonic before. Not really, anyway. Sure, he's been kicked while he's down, but this is on a whole other level. And Flynn uses this to show the reader a new side of his character. He's always had his pride and ego, but finally, that's being poked and prodded at. After all, Sonic's attack here isn't framed as some heroic moment of deadly determination. Instead, it's a psychotic breakdown, the moment where it's confirmed that Eggman truly got in his head, and following the battle, Sonic feels different. He coldly explains the situation to his remaining friends as he marches forward, past them, toward another confrontation with the Doctor. While Sonic, of course, wants to keep his friends safe, there's something else here too. As Tails continues to warn him about the overwhelming odds against him, Sonic finally snaps, saying, "I've got this." And Tails bluntly calls him out for this, refusing to let Sonic's stubborn pride get him and everyone else killed. It's a scene I never would have expected from the two, and serves to make both characters feel far more real to me, with a vibe that's genuinely a bit uncomfortable as these two friends butt heads and clash. But what makes all of this so compelling to me isn't that it's some sort of character arc. Sonic never had trouble trusting his friends or fighting alongside them. This isn't some series-long problem we needed to address. Instead, it's just fascinating to see Tails' words cause Sonic to take a step back from this side of himself. His annoyed silence leading to a cocky declaration that falls away to his inner fear. No, I can't be too late again. Basically, it's just so interesting to watch Sonic reach this low point, to see what he takes away from it, and how he'll get back to form. But we shouldn't get too ahead of ourselves just yet. Something's gotta give if our heroes are going to stand a chance against the Mad Doctor. Which is why it's so great that our team discovers they have one more friend who they can rely on. Nicole. Nicole? Yeah. Now, if that name isn't making you excited, making you want to juice and jam, well, I can't blame you. Well, this handheld supercomputer is one of the SAT-AM holdovers, an important piece of the show that defines so much of early Archie. She's rarely had anything to do. Instead, throughout almost all the prior writers' material, Nicole was just either forgotten or there. Like, yeah, that's Nicole, right? She's sure in this scene. Some of you may not even remember her despite me casually saying her name this entire retrospective. Because more than anything else, Nicole has been a plot device. She can give info, hack things, whatever. Which is such a shame because she could have been and should have been so much more. See, all the way back in issue 17, Sally is grieving, wishing that her life could stop being so awful, when suddenly a mysterious orb falls out of the night sky. However, our heroes are unable to see what's inside. Right after this, Sally's mentor suddenly passes away, and it's only now, when Sally is more lost than ever before, that the orb opens. It seems Sally's plea was heard. She has her symbol of hope. But what was it? Well, it was Nicole. After this, Sally goes on a personal mission to the Forbidden Zone, following the quest laid out in her mentor's final testament. Even though Sally wanted to go it alone with only Nicole at her side, her friends wouldn't take no for an answer. They wanted to help her, and so they did, making their way through danger together. In the end, they found out the reason Sally's mentor told her to come here, a scroll with words of wisdom that would serve Sally well. So well, in fact, that eventually she and her friends would win in the fight against Robotnik, as we watch Rotor from the future create Nicole, allowing Sally to send her back in time to help guide her younger self. A friend she desperately needed back then, and a way to live up to her mentor's last words. To thine own self be true. On its own, I thought the story was fine. I appreciated the attempt to define Sally's character and how it showed that sometimes finding strength in yourself means finding strength in your friends. Kinda, I mean, Sally's not really happy they're here, honestly. Regardless of that, though, the bigger problem is that the series' constant mishandling of Sally led to this story losing much of its significance. Because I know this isn't true. I know Sally won't to her own self be true because I didn't even know who she was. I knew Nicole wouldn't play some big role in defeating Robotnik because the prior writers had all but forgotten about her. Also, we basically just dropped this being the future timeline as far as I can tell, so I don't even really know where Nicole is from now, so whatever. Genuinely, there are only 2 other stories I can think of related to her from across the comics' entire run after this, both of them in the post-space era. First, there's this one, where Nicole and Sally swap bodies, and Nicole gets to spend some time outside. It's brief, but it's enough for her to get a taste of corporeal life, and she longs for more. This was built upon in the story Stargazing, where Sally finds Nicole outside in a new physical form. It's a complex hologram of sorts, something she's been working on because she wants to be able to properly live. So she and Sally look up at the stars together before Nicole's power quickly fades away and she returns to her computer. It's their first big moment together ever, I think. And though the story has its heart, seeing an AI try to grow beyond itself and feel, it also shows how little Nicole has lived up to her purpose. A gift from Sally to herself that came from the stars, a friend to help lift her up? No. Now they're both laying beneath those same stars together, and Sally is still crying, in an era of the comic that's treated her the worst. So, over the course of his first 14 issues, Flynn takes these little bits of characterization and runs with them, making Nicole a more present figure. Sure, she isn't doing anything all that much, but she's properly there. She gets briefly corrupted by Adam, she helps Espio take down this base and even engages in some friendly banter. She's instrumental in Shadow learning his past, with Tracy Yardley bringing her physical design to life so well that Sonic makes it clear he definitely Control-S that links. But overall, she's still mostly in the background, and whatever she spends most of her time doing, we aren't seeing that. But that's about to change, because Flynn is going to take what we know about Nicole, and he's going to use it to craft one of the comic's most memorable moments. Because Nicole has a plan. This next sequence is awesome. Regardless of the tease of some ace up their sleeves, it's clear that the stakes have never been higher for our heroes, as Robotnik gloats to them and makes an example of one of their own to show the true terror of the egg grapes. In this case, with Charmy B, all while the remaining freedom fighters inch closer to the city. But thanks to Knuckles and Amy, the team is able to break through just in time to save Charmy, free the prisoners, and allow Nicole to hack into Eggman's systems and do something. For now, though, all our heroes can do is run away from Eggman on his turf. So he begins rounding everyone up again, terrified as they're teleported once more, their brief escape for nothing. Finally, Sally, Sonic, and a handful of others are left alone, their backs against the wall, Sally's entire family zapped in front of her. She asks Sonic to do something to help them make a way out, but he refuses. He's back to his confident, cocky self as he trusts in a plan he doesn't even fully understand. So Eggman captures Sonic too, and thus seals his fate. Because Nicole's plan has worked, as it's revealed she hacked into Eggman's system in order to tamper with his teleportation beam. So it hasn't been sending our heroes back into the egg grapes at all. It's been sending them home, but not to the wasteland Eggman left behind. Not to some rebuilt knothole. No, it sent them back to the city they've been fighting for since before the events of the comic itself. The home they thought would forever be out of reach. This is their Lake of Rings, their castle, their home, their new Mobotropolis. This is Nicole's gift to her friends. See, in the time she's been off in the background of the Flynn Era, Nicole's been hard at work, planning out the recreation of their old home by taking control of the nanites and more specifically the nanite city left over by Adam. After all, if one AI could control and manipulate these microscopic machines, if Tommy Turtle could, then why not Nicole, someone who'd also been infected by them? It's a moment I never could have predicted, but it still uses a prior plot device to allow our heroes to get back what they lost in a way that actually makes complete sense. It's also an unmistakable miracle for them that you'd think would feel random or half-baked, and yet, it doesn't. Because despite building the city so she could live among her friends, Robotnik's egg fleet is already here, raining down on our hero's home and forcing Nicole to use all her power to keep them safe through the city's shields, meaning she once again must fade away. Our heroes have received a gift, and now they must protect it. As Sonic steps out to confront Eggman, the Doctor reminds him of his failure. How this is a fight he simply cannot win. After all, this battle armor was specifically designed to outmatch the Blue Blur in every way. Finally, it's impossible for Sonic the Hedgehog to overcome Dr. Robotnik.
Yeah, I figured as much. Which means you've got nothing against these guys.
Freedom Fighters, Chaotix, attack! While our heroes may have received a miracle, they definitely weren't handed one, because this victory was only possible because of their efforts, and because of Eggman's ultimate failure. He assumed he could destroy Sonic's spirit, and maybe he would have been right, if not for Sonic's friends. And what allowed these friends to be there in the first place to pick him up? It was Rotor protecting Tails, Julie Sue saving Knuckles, and Mighty fighting to avenge his friend. Then what allowed them to use the nanites in the first place? Well, it was Tommy's sacrifice. It was Nicole reaching out to her friends. Because his charmy freaking beast says he's about to be drained and killed. Despite it all, I've fought for our world. No matter what you do to me, I will still fight for Mobius, and I'm not alone. Eggman's ultimate failure was his flippancy towards this silly little war and his failed attempts made along the way. He assumed Sonic's friends were worthless secondary fodder. But of course, I know better. Sonic knows better. Because the world of Archie Sonic is the main character. Knuckles, Vector, and Mighty don't give the Doctor a moment to breathe before they've ripped him apart. Bunny incinerates the rest like it's nothing. Ray and Tails provide a distraction as Antoine, Espio, and Julie Sue weaken the final portion for Amy to destroy. All while Sonic gloats that, even if there are times when the Doctor can get the upper hand on him, defeating his friends will always be impossible. Sonic will always have them to lean on. And that isn't a weakness. No. That's one of his greatest strengths. Then there's Sally. When Sally saw Nicole fade away, she cried just like before, but now those tears feel different. Because as she takes in the sights of the home she never imagined she'd get back, Sally reflects on how she used to be the one protecting others, leading her friends instead of being burdened by her role as the acting monarchy, an heir apparent, forced to get married or dealing with constant formalities. Clear that Sally doesn't just regret her past self, she resents it. And now she's here, standing confidently over Robotnik and being the one to orchestrate his downfall. And though the Doctor attempts to save face, he's ultimately forced to flee, humiliated but determined to return again, and now with something to prove. After all, the war is far from over. The Freedom Fighters and Chaotix, after all their struggling, have simply reached a place where they can truly begin to fight back. Which of course is fine by our two determined heroes. This change sold perfectly through the art. Going forward, Sally's body language consistently informs us about her character, letting us see the baseline level of confidence she carries herself with now. She just looks like she isn't willing to be stomped on anymore, standing tall, arms crossed, or hands on her hips. It's all part of her embodying this competence and tenacity, traits we know she once had as the leader of the Freedom Fighters. But it's with a consistent charm and poise that she never had before, along with a new level of sensitivity to the feelings of others. I mean, now Sally isn't just capable because she orders the Freedom Fighters around and undermines Robotnik's rule. Now she's every bit as snappy as Sonic, firing back at his quips with playful jabs of her own, filled with a determination to be stronger, to be better, not for Sonic, not for her role, not for her family, but finally for herself.
You gotta give him credit. The man knows how to make an exit.
Yeah, but he doesn't know when to make it.
New do for the occasion?
A little something symbolic, just to show I've got my mind and heart back on the right track.
Wow, I've never known you to be so girly.
Don't ruin the moment, Blue.
All right. It's good to be home, Sal.
Seeing this final page for the first time, it got me. My heart swelled seeing these characters who I'd watched go through so much struggle, pain, and all the bad writing in between come out the other side not only happy, but so overwhelmed by joy that they lift each other into the air, find the nearest partner and just embrace or smile, right alongside those who are so darn happy that they gotta drop to the ground and jam out to the fact they wiki won! For all the well-deserved praise I've given Flynn for his excellent ideas or the charming and heartfelt dialogue he's written, that alone would not make this era hit as hard as it does. Because from the very beginning, this comic has been absolutely indebted to its artists, whether that be the colorists, inkers, or pencilers. With Tracy Yardley in particular, there are whole extra layers of characterization that are no doubt only there because he decided to imbue every single panel of his run with personality. And he's far from the only one. Consistently, the art amplifies the emotions of the scenes, taking an already great foundation and making it truly phenomenal. Because of that, I now adore this cast of characters, I adore this comic, and I adore this world. Like, it's one thing to write a scene where a villain steps onto the battlefield for a nice cliffhanger. It's another to have that entrance mimic our hero by having the exact same setup be punctuated by them stepping out of a small panel versus the villain stepping out to his own full page, commanding the space of the comic itself. It's one thing to write a scene where, in order to sympathize with a new character, we show their desolate circumstances. It's another to punctuate all their fears and doubts like this. A single silent panel that sells the weight of their commitment to this world that drives a simple and resolute no. Going forward, the Archie Sonic comic is consistently paced and portrayed with a truly cinematic gravitas, paneled with a stylization that makes every reread feel so striking or even new as I discover random background details. Like here when Sonic is chained up in his endgame handcuffs, captured by a character who's learned not to underestimate him based on what he's seen before, only to be saved by a character who chased after Sonic in that same story but now uses his weapon to free his rival. Yet the comic never once draws attention to this. It also doesn't draw attention to this moment where Sonic and Sally are facing off against their evil doubles and they, without a word between them, use the same tactic from all the way back in issue 24, showing how in sync they are. Or how about here when all our heroes were captured? Part of me thought, hey, I wonder if Bunny, the powerhouse she is, might stand a chance breaking out, only to see that both her and Mighty have been trying. And speaking of Bunny, actually, remember that one-off pun about Bunny wanting to be a hairdresser all the way back in issue 4? Well, now it returns as a bonding gesture for both Sally and Bunny, as they're both able to do each other's hair, one for the other's very special day, and the other as a symbolic gesture of self-improvement. And I could go on and on. There's so much here. Never mind all these uniquely designed character cards the comic now has at the start of many stories, imbuing even the credits with personality. And of course, at the most basic level, the characters always just look way past cool. Whether they were a Sonic fan coming onto the book or just someone doing their job, the entire team is what makes Flynn's Era one to remember, and what makes the Archie Sonic comic one of the most gratifying experiences I've ever had with a story, because I got to watch a series evolve and mutate through so many different tones and styles and levels of quality until it became this, something I truly love, all while refusing from the very beginning to discard any of it, because despite the many, many things the comic has forgotten, it has also always pulled from past material, always tried to justify everything it's done in an attempt to be a cohesive story. Flynn is just the final step, the final writer to remember, but who, unlike many of the past creatives, does so with a clear vision in mind, and the ability to execute on that vision with a team that will hold his work to a high standard, with a personal motivation to make it as great as it can be. It's because of this throughline that the comic actually feels connected and cohesive in its insanity, meaning that this era will never stop having these wild concepts or dark resolutions, never stop having clashing character designs or interpersonal drama, and it will never lose its heart or its charm. Of course, the big difference now is I no longer just enjoy most of these ideas in retrospect. I no longer have to look at it and think of what could have been, of the potential. It's now just an enjoyable experience, period, embracing every facet of its identity with as much confidence as its way past coolest hog. And I genuinely love it. Now, normally, I'm the type of person who can't stand when someone tells me to trudge through a piece of fiction because it eventually gets good, especially if I'm told I simply need to watch like a couple seasons or read a couple books before getting there. Nah, I'd rather not waste my time on that, which is why it's so strange that, in the case of this comic, I've gotta say, no, do not
Read it. Did you hear anything I said in these last 8 hours? Why do you think I made this for you? It was so you could get the important info and experience some of the pain and frustration of reading the comic without needing to actually read the whole thing yourself. So don't make all my efforts be in vain, and certainly don't waste the 8 hours of setup you just endured. Wow. 8 hours of setup. Oh no! Well, at least now I can make all the individual videos I've wanted to make since I first read this comic. Because that's right, everything we've discussed today isn't even close to the highs this comic will reach. This section, heck, this entire retrospective so far, has been about how Archie Sonic becomes a masterpiece. And spoiler alert, how the Archie Sonic comic becomes one of my favorite stories ever. So please do me a favor and read Archie Sonic. Not from the beginning, of course, unless you're insane, though the gag area is still a good old time, and please give Tammy my regards if you see her there. But no, I want you to begin reading at the start of the Flynn Era, issue 160. Since, despite everything I covered in this video, I skipped a bunch of stuff from his early issues, like, you watched the AMV, who's this green guy, what's he doing, being peak fiction? That's right, because BAM! He's getting a video. What about Shadow? He learned his past, so why hasn't he been helping our heroes? BAM! Video. Also, reminder, I've said every single negative thing I can think of about this story pre-reboot. I've read this comic a million times now, and yep, I have no more major problems with this following era. Because guess what? It's all great now. I love it. So you know the thing you hate, person who's read the comic already? Bam! It's getting a video on why it's excellent. Bam, bam, bam. Here's some silhouettes for future videos. Read the comic. The reading guide is in the description. And with it, you can juice on over to the pre-reboot Flynn era. And if you're wondering how to actually go about reading these bad boys since they're not on sale because Sega and Archie want nothing to do with the series anymore, you'll figure it out. I believe in you. Because after all, you're way past cool. So thank you for watching these videos, it's been a blast. When I started this retrospective with Ian Waffles, I was hoping I'd be able to go all in on the editing for these and keep on having lots of fun with them, and because of you, I was able to do that. Also, it's just been great to read the comments and learn about other people's experiences with the comics, so if you can keep putting those down below in the following videos, that would be wonderful. Anyway, once again, thank you for watching, and always remember to ask yourself, hey, what about Knuckles?
The new porcupine on the block with the buff chest. Out in the wilderness with the ruggedness. Knock, knock, it's Knuckles, the blow thrower. Independent blower, magical emerald holder. Give you the coldest shoulder. My spot goes boulders. That's why I stay alone. I was born by myself. I don't need a posse, I get it all by myself. Adversaries get shelled. Right on.